Yeah. Alrighty. We should be live basically any moment now. I did this in the app this Sunday now. The Sunday Orbiter thing. And then there we go. And there we go. And now we just have to and now I just have to hope someone joins and tells me if they can actually hear you. Or if I need to turn you up. I doubt I'll need to turn you down. Because you're already just whispering. But oh. I tried to fix my audio because I wasn't sure because I had a fucking change where my mic was, and so I was like wanted to make sure that everything sounded that I was at least like somewhat decent. Yeah, hold on, let me actually. No, no. Okay, well, I can fix that. What am I not capture? Did I not do it right? I might not have done it right. Yeah, I see the issue. I see the issue. I see the issue. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna. We don't need this. No, no, no. Fuck you. I hate you. I wanted to name it that. Not you. We'll just name it that. Okay. We go to application. We're having leftist audio issues. Okay, now you should be audible. And that brings us
You
to today's
what?
and that brings us to today's stream sponsor, which is Audible. And so
Use code envious political.
yeah, use code envious political now to claim your free book.
Yeah, I can. I think I can hear myself. Sadly.
Are you loud? Are you audible? Are you hashtag audible?
Yeah, I'm hashtag audible.
I don't need to hashtag turn you up.
Yeah. No. It's audible. We're good.
All right, good. Alrighty, and now I just have to go back to page 48. So, for everyone who wasn't fucking here in my chamber because you're not allowed, you're actually not, you're just not allowed. I don't like you. Um, we are going to skip over. I was talking to Shakespeare. I was like, should we? Is there any place we should start? And she was just like, well, we should just start here because it'll explain most stuff, and if we need to, we can just go back. And I was like, okay. So we'll start at page 48, which will give us a lot less pages. And so we won't be here for a million years. Only be here for like tens of thousands of years, which
Yeah.
is a reduction. So
Which one would you like? Who would you like me to start reading?
yeah, sure.
Okay. So, dolus specialis of genocide. Legal framework. Genocide is an international crime that incurs individual criminal responsibility, for which a state may be responsible if the conduct was attributable to the state. While the standard of proof to find an accused guilty of genocide in a criminal trial is, quote, beyond a reasonable doubt, end quote, the standard for establishing state responsibility is based on um, evidence that is fully conclusive. According to the International Court of Justice, the court has to be, quote, fully convinced that the allegations made in the proceedings that the crime of genocide or the other acts enumerated in Article 3 have been committed have been clearly established, end quote. To find a state responsible for genocide, it is therefore important to establish that the perpetrator committed the underlying acts of genocide with the general intent, dolus generalis, to commit the underlying acts and required specific intent, dolus specialis, for genocide. The Commission notes that the specific intent requirement is attached to the perpetrator if of the underlying act, not to the state. State responsibility may therefore be established when the acts were committed by actors whose conduct is attributable to the state.
I have a question right off the bat. Is
Yeah.
this going to explain what dolus specialis and dolus generalis are? Um,
Uh, yeah, it will go into it because this section's over them, but generally speaking, it's just about intent, right? It's mens
yeah.
rea, right? Like so it's just that.
Okay.
But one thing I do want to note is that for the ICJ uniquely, when it comes to determining genocide, it does it over using the full cumulative weight of the evidence, right? Because it does have a different standard, right? It has to be fully convinced. So it doesn't do it on like, oh, this one tiny little thing, right? This one inconsistency or this one. Instead, it looks at the whole case, and that's rather unique in terms of law, like the way how it can do that. It preponders all of the evidence as a whole as well.
Okay. That's actually very interesting. I didn't know that. Alrighty.
Okay.
If anyone in chat has any questions, feel free to ask. Shakespeare's probably going to be able to answer some of them, but even if any of you have any comments or whatever that you just want to say, I can read them out. I can read them out for all those with ears to hear.
Yeah, and
We're
all. Oh, did you say what document this was? I'm sorry, I just started reading. I didn't even realize.
uh it's the UN Commission. I'll just go back. I'll just go back to the first page. Legal analysis of the conduct of Israel in Gaza pursuant to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And it's the 16th session. I don't know if that's important
Okay.
or not.
Yeah, it just means that it was the one that was most recent. So
Sorry, 60th session, not 60th.
yeah,
Different number.
60th.
It's a
Yeah,
different number.
yeah, and so the ICI is what's important. It's an independent commission of inquiry, so so they bring like people that are not just from the United Nations as well, right? So it's not just the United Nations is saying this as well. It's other people too. Hello,
Hello,
Stone.
hello, Estelle.
Okay, do you want to read 157?
Yeah. The Commission has discussed in the sections above the general intent required to establish the commission of genocidal acts as prescribed in the Genocide Convention. The Commission now analyzes whether the underlying acts of genocide were committed by the perpetrators with a specific intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinians in Gaza as such. The Commission notes that the intent to destroy does not mean that destruction needs to have occurred. Furthermore, as the intent is in relation to the destruction of the group, the underlying acts may be committed against civilians and non-civilians of a particular group, and such acts would still amount to genocide as long as the mens rea element is established. The Commission notes that on 26th of January 2024, the International Court of Justice stated that the Palestinians appeared to constitute a distinct national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, and hence a protected group within the meaning of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. Furthermore, noting that the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip comprise over 2 million people, the International Court of Justice has stated that Palestinians in the Gaza Strip from a substantial part of the protected group. End quote.
Do you have
Also, hey,
anything?
Natsuetsugu.
Oh yeah, hello, not Biz. Do you have anything do you want to add to that paragraph?
I don't think so. I think that was actually pretty straightforward.
Okay. Genocidal intent may be established either through 1. Direct evidence, such as statements expressing an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the protected group as such, or 2. Circumstantial evidence, taking into account the totality of evidence, which is what I was referring to earlier, by inference through the examination of the pattern of conduct, right? So like the people that say like show me David Irving that are like, oh, show me a specific document that said that Hitler wanted to blah blah blah, right? It's like you don't need that. Like you can look at the full spectrum of everything that occurred and determine it from that at the ICJ when it
Yeah.
comes to this crime. The commission considers that sexual and gender-based violence may be taken into account to infer genocidal intent. Additionally, acts directed at children may also be assessed. The Commission notes that when establishing genocidal intent, the overall factual situation should be taken into consideration rather than individual or discrete incidents. Furthermore, actions taken before, during, and after the commission of the genocidal act may be considered in establishing genocidal intent. Yeah, if anybody has any questions in the chat, feel free to either post it in the chat. I'd direct it to either one of us.
Yes. I don't know how helpful I will be, um, but I can certainly try to be helpful.
So the reaction of the accused party can be used against them. Yeah, because oftentimes there will be like reprisal attacks or denial, which is also part of genocide, as well as like what happened in Bosnia, which is where they began to create like mass graves, but then they began to move them around. So it's like that's the reason why, like even after they do say, "Oh, this happened," they can still look at its reaction because of that factor.
This is actually,
Because mhm.
I was going to say as a little side note, this is actually very interesting because I just went over that one paper I sent you by Toby Nathan goes over the
Oh
case
right.
of a woman who was in I think she was Albanian, and uh she was like attacked by Serbian soldiers,
Hmm.
and stuff like that, and she had like nightmares about it. So
Yeah, that would have been the Kosovo War, which is still, although the president Trump likes to say that he ended that conflict. I'm like, how? But anyway,
yeah,
so
likes to say does a lot of things.
yeah, like I like literally in the thing I was reading on Saturday, he said I in the past 9 months I've ended 9 different conflicts, and literally like Thailand and Cambodia started fighting again like the day after the report was published. So
But yeah,
okay, so okay. In Bosnia versus Serbia, the International Court of Justice stated that for a pattern of conduct to be accepted as evidence of a specific intent to destroy the group in whole or in part, it would have to be such that the pattern of conduct could only point to the existence of such intent. Referring to the standard in Bosnia versus Serbia, the International Court of Justice in Croatia versus Serbia stated, quote, in order to infer the existence of dolus specialis from a pattern of conduct, it is necessary and sufficient that this is the only inference that could be reasonably be drawn from the acts in question, end quote. Factors that may be taken into consideration include the scale and systematic nature of the attacks and the casualties and damage that were, quote, far in excess of what was justified by military necessity, end quote. the degree of injuries caused. So just to quickly add on to this, like this is the reason why, like technically speaking, for genocide, it doesn't have to be a single death. But with these particular cases, right, what they are trying to look at is the fact that could it be reasonably inferred, right, from looking at the acts that were committed, right, that they had some kind of intent behind them, right? Because there's no, like now we have a term that came from the Yugoslav wars that, in essence, is now used as a kind of like less than genocide, but it meant genocide even back then, which was ethnic cleansing. And so that's where the dolus specialis, right, like the specific intent of people as well, from a pattern of conduct. So that's why, oftentimes, like I've mentioned, like the scale of things, right? Like Gaza has had 2.5 million people. If 600,000 people, there are 600,000 fatalities, then that's a high proportion, right? And so that goes into also the severity of the charge as well. So
Right. So yeah. So then the dolus specialis is just that it's this is it is it can be it can be it can be the reasonable only reasonable inference, like it says that it's like that this was that they just wanted to do this. They like
yeah.
literally this is whatever it is. Um I assume what's going to be pointed to as part of that would be maybe the excessive bombings then in Gaza. I assume that's what it might be.
Yeah, and because it does mention at the very end, right, that was justified by military necessity, right? Like
Mhm.
this is where the whole idea of like Israel claiming human shields, of Israel saying that, oh, uh this hospital has tunnels where Hamas is, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, the the military necessity means does the actual effect of like what they use, right? Because they say, oh, we're super precise, blah blah blah. But if 92% of the housing stock in the Gaza Strip is destroyed, then that would go against them, right? Like if they truly were targeted, right, or whatever, or if they could show that they were what is called the principle of distinction in international law, right, that they were going after people that would be considered combatants, then you could say that's military necessity. But if they can't prove that, then that goes against them. So,
Well, that yeah. Okay. Well, that actually makes a lot of sense. Learning something. We're I'm learning something. I hope everyone else is who's watching this too. Also, little bit of a side note. I wanted to say this. I'll probably say it again at the end. Um, I don't know when this will happen, but if uh, since I assume you said you're down, we will probably also be going over the new Rights Watch report soon as well.
yes.
So, and I would totally love to stream that as well because
Okay, sounds good.
because I like this stuff. It gives me excuse to stream something that's like I think pretty useful to hear about and talk about. Alrighty. Well, also, hey, Godspeed.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then
hello, Godspeed.
I will start at 160. The Commission considers that while there may be other reasons for a discrete act, for example, to achieve a military advantage by forcefully transferring the group or to destroy the existence of an armed group, this does not preclude the existence of a genocidal intent, as long as the genocidal intent is the only reasonable inference to be drawn, having ruled out other inferences that are not reasonable based on the totality of evidence at hand.
So,
Okay,
in other words, like, yeah,
even if they want to, um, even if they're saying they just they want to take this or they want to do this for some military advantage, as long as it can be concluded that you still want to destroy the group, this particular
Yeah.
this group, it's still
And
genocidal
this were
intent.
right, especially like because it does talk about destroy the existence of an armed group because the state of Israel says, well, we're not at war with, the Palestinians in Gaza, we're at war with Hamas,
Yeah,
right? And so when they say that, it's like, well, by writing this in the report, they're saying even if you say you're only going after Hamas or that's your real like what you're going to claim is what you're really doing, this this would be like it doesn't matter if that's your quote unquote excuse, right? Like technically speaking, from the totality of the evidence, you can still infer that there was genocidal intent. Like you could be using, like for example, to use the example from Rwanda, right? Is that like you had the Hutu power government and um, they had the Interahamwe, and so they use the fact that there was a Tutsi-led um, uh, insurgency, right, to then commit the genocide, in Rwanda. But they also went against the Tutsi insurgency, which later, defeated the Hutu power government and the Interahamwe. And so when that was judged, it was like, well, they very often genocides happen in the context of wars, and so people will use this like, oh well, we were going after X group, right? As a not the whole people, but they're still committing, other acts that also, designate that as genocide.
yeah, all right. Also, yeah, yeah. I wish more people would do stuff like this. I really like um another channel. I like obviously Shakespeare. You're amazing. You're fantastic. But also In Time, they do pretty good stuff. They have pretty interesting guests on. Um, Brooks, whenever he's covering stuff, he was really good. Brooks the other day was of the Quarantine Collective was talking about a whole bunch of stuff, and it was really good. Could Estelle's asking if you read the article that she put on the Discord.
Yeah, and I was gonna print it out. I usually like to read these. Like I have this report. I like to take
Oh,
my notes on it. I tend to print them out, and
yeah. If I had a printer, I'd probably do that too.
especially because I tend to take a lot of notes, like oh, reference this or into this or whatever. So, um, okay, so you read 160, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Absent explicit expressions of intent by the perpetrators, genocidal intent may be established through circumstantial evidence. The Commission therefore takes into consideration the following non-exhaustive indicators when analyzing the dolus specialis of genocide: the actions of the perpetrators, the general context, the perpetration of other culpable acts systemically directed at the same group, the scale of the atrocities committed, including the means and methods used, the number of victims, the systematic targeting of victims on account of their membership in a particular group, the repetition of destructive and discriminatory acts, and the use of derogatory language towards excuse me, members of the targeted group. The Commission considers that acts amounting to sexual and gender-based violence and acts committed against children may be used to infer the specific intent for genocide. The Commission also notes that, that evidence of destruction of educational, religious, or cultural sites would be used to infer intent to physically destroy the group, which is an important thing because so the first part with the acts committed against children, one of the five things that are considered, right? Like, and this is the narrowest definition we have. Like as a genocide studies, like in academia, we have a much more wider, definitions of what genocide is. But according to the convention, one of those, I believe it's the fourth one or might be the fifth one, is transferring children from one group to another group, or et cetera, right? But this is saying as well that like acts perpetrated against children, right, beyond the scope of just transfer between two groups, is also going to be seen as part of this. And then the last part is that because we know that all of the universities in Gaza have been razed to the ground. We know that the central archive of Gaza in Gaza City was destroyed, right? Which would be, but also mosques, right? Like, or in churches, right? Like the third oldest church that still exists, right? It got struck, um, because those sites are also supposed to be protected. Um, Under international law, like there's no reason why you should go after them, and this is where concepts like epistemicide come in, right? Where it's like they want to destroy cultural things and also destroy knowledge. And so one of the things too is that there was a remark earlier in the genocide that the British cemetery that they had in Gaza was actually taken care of, was actually kept alone by the IDF, right? Whereas all the buildings around it had been destroyed, right? So like, so that also showed that there was a like they weren't willing to trample or destroy, right? European cemeteries, but they were willing to send the bulldozers into the uh, Palestinian cemeteries as well. Pardon me, in the Palestinian cemeteries. So like that also adds up. Yeah, right. Not so Oedipus. Yeah, check, check, check. Yeah.
Yeah. I also don't remember if no one might remember this. Um, but I remember that one guy, I think he was some sort of like vegan. Maybe he had like I think he was a doctor of some sort, like a dentist or something. And he made a report about this, trying to say about the Gaza genocide. Um, just
Mm-hmm.
like Avi Bitterman, I think was his name,
Oh, yes.
and
Okay.
and he was just like, well, not enough people died, just not enough people died. If it was a genocide, more people would be killed, and
Oh,
it was just
dermatologist.
yeah, dermatologist, yeah, and yeah, it was
And yeah, Karasu's correct in that, and this is also a way to destroy a group of people able to understand their history, right? Which is that epistemicide, cultural genocide aspect that was included in Lemkin's own work, which sort of founded the basis for it. But even in my own research, like I definitely look at the concept of cultural genocide as well, like epistemicide, but also like forced assimilation practices, etc. Because they like there's this documentary, and there's this part that I can't remember the name of the documentary right off the top of my head, but like there's this person that essentially was brought up in the residential schools for indigenous people in the United States, and he starts crying because like he would be harmed. I'll put it like that anytime that he spoke his indigenous language, to the point where he only knew English, and it's like then it shows him crying like it's like they stole my tongue from me, like and so that's definitely why that's also to be included as well.
yeah that
And mhm.
I was gonna say stuff like that comes up in some of the science studies stuff I've read about how there will be not like necessarily genocide levels of stuff happening, but there will be just like the wiping out of like uh knowledge and practices over in favor of like one group over the other, and it's like a it's something that's happened.
Hmm.
Um,
And yes, Karasu, you're completely right because things on these things not only are not only important because culture in the abstract sense, of course, but that they're actual networks and practices that links real people, right? Which is why, like in the book, Literature is History, um, Mario T. Garcia particularly states, highlights how the United States actually had it as their official policy um, that that the language policy, in particular, like in California, that people that I know, were raised at a time when people you would be corporally punished for speaking Spanish was a thing. And so he notes in his book that like that was something that they explicitly stated they were trying to do. That's what the education program in the United States was also intending to do, was to completely get rid of um, people speaking Spanish. So, and also like quote unquote behaving to the point where, and I don't want to go too far off a field, but they even had people at the time, this was during the Decade of Betrayal, so during the mass expulsions in the 1930s, um, writing in essence that it actually was quote unquote unhealthy for Mexicans that they like to be in family units so much. So it's a very strange thing. But yeah, it does cause generational trauma. And that is a huge thing with the after effects as well, because I mean even to this day, if you go to Rwanda, right, there are people who um, as well as other places where it's like the legacy of those things doesn't necessarily mean that like they are taken care of or that they are viewed in a positive light, um, even afterwards, but also the fact that like then their children also sort of have uh, that stigma and that anxiety, I guess I would put it like that, of the event sort of continuing on. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Did you want to read the first part of section B?
I would love to.
Oh wait, Karasu said, so bring this back
Yeah.
to Gaza. This is why the narrative that there is something inherent in Islam or Palestine culture that needs to be improved before peace is part of, exactly, yes, yeah, like any single time that people want to bring up that like again, if this were applied to to Judaism, for example, people would be like, oh, that's obviously that's something that is not for you to determine, right? Someone who isn't Jewish, right? But in this case, it is one of those things that's kind of given a kind of a larger pass by some people because it sort of fits a sort of neo-colonial, well, I would even say just colonial outlook about Islam itself as well. Right, because the Palestinian resistance is not understood as situational, but as inherent that needs to be forcefully changed without the, yeah, it's the reason why when they say like, oh, we don't want to eliminate X, right? We want to eliminate Hamas. Well, it's like the conditions that produced Hamas are still going to be there. So, like what does that really mean, right? So, so yeah, if you want to move on to the next part for the factual findings.
Will do. Section 1, Statements of Israeli State Actors. And then, Karis, you said before we go, before Hamas, you had non Islamic resistance. Just to finish off that. Before I start, And then 162. To analyze the genocidal intent of the Israeli authorities, the Commission refers both to statements made by members of the Israeli government, direct evidence of dolus specialis, and to the pattern of conduct of the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces, including during military operations, that were consistent with the sentiments of the statements of Israeli of the statements of Israeli government, indirect or circumstantial evidence of dolus specialis.
Okay, so as early as 7th October 2023, Israeli officials made statements that indicated their intention to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a group. Palestinians were consistently dehumanized by Israeli officials. Furthermore, Israeli authorities made many statements that explicitly called for vengeance, destruction, and annihilation. The Commission believes, having analyzed the military operations of the Israeli security forces, such statements were expressed to encourage hatred towards Palestinians and violence against Palestinians. The statements were received by the Israeli security forces as an order to destroy Palestinians in Gaza, and such an order was indeed executed through military operations.
Yep. So this is literally just saying these
Yeah.
statements. They said this stuff, and security forces acted upon it.
Yeah, like I don't know if you've
So
ever seen the Al Jazeera documentary that's like called like documenting war crimes in Gaza, but it's like they say some really weird, creepy stuff. Like it just shows you how ubiquitous a lot of this stuff was pre October 7th on the Israeli side. But like it also comes out with the current, um, you know, uh, hostilities that are ongoing.
yeah, I forget which documentary it was I saw, but I cried at parts of it. It was a I think it was a more recent documentary. Jimp showed it to us. I think Not So Oedipus was there, and it was about I think it was about the West Bank specifically, and it was about
Mm,
the destruction of the houses of like the homes and stuff like that.
yeah.
And yeah, No Other Land. Thank you, Estelle.
Mm.
And that was like it was really fucking. I was. It was a really good documentary, but yeah, it was really weird watching it and and seeing that stuff. It was really felt really strange.
I didn't I didn't watch all of it with you, I think.
Yeah, I didn't
Not
think
to
you
read it.
did. Yeah, I didn't think you did, but I thought you might have been there. It seemed like something that would be up your alley that you would at least appear to. Alrighty.
And let's
Well,
see, was there a footnote on any of this? Yeah, there was one, 385, that's actually an explanatory footnote. So I'll read that really quickly. A culpable act is an act that does not in and of itself amount to an underlying genocidal act, but may be relied upon as evidence to establish genocidal intent of perpetrators. For example, even though forcible transfer is not itself a prohibited underlying act of genocide under the Genocide Convention, such act may be relied on in assessing the genocidal intent of the perpetrators because it is an act systematically directed at the same group. And so this is where, it begins to cite stuff with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, in particular with, again, forced transfer, right, of people. So, uh, yeah.
and then 164. The commission has recorded the statements of the most senior Israeli public officials, including the president, the prime minister, ministers in government, members of the state security cabinet, members of the War Management Cabinet, members of the Knesset, other politicians, Israeli security forces officials and commanders, and others in their official public capacity using inciting, provocative, dehumanizing language on and since 7th of October 2023. Their words shaped the public narrative and garnered widespread public support for their positions. Their words also affected the development and implementation of public policies and military operations.
Uh, Israeli political and military leaders have consistently described the military operations in the Gaza Strip as self-defense and "quote unquote" a just war. Israeli political and military leaders also repeatedly stated that the attack of 7th October 2023 presented an existential threat to Israel as a justification for the decision to conduct a large-scale continuing military operation in Gaza that it has amounted to total war. It's important as well that they use that term because people know historically, right, like what that term total war means, right? So attacks in southern Israel on 7th October 23 were brutal crimes, but they did not pose an existential threat to the state of Israel. Israel was and is responsible for the protection of its population, but the means of doing that must take into account the fact that it has taken by force and is unlawfully occupying and settling Palestinian territory by continuing violence, denying the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. So one thing to also add in here is like there was I believe it was in June of last year, that the International Court of Justice gave a ruling that Israel, the only thing that Israel can do in the occupied territories, as they often are called, but um, the lands that are to be set aside for a Palestinian state, at least if we think of them in the post 67 borders, is the only thing that they can do is leave. Like they have no right to do anything there. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say, Ethan. Gila couldn't be there. So anyway, but yeah. So that's another thing. Is like they were occupying Gaza, so they can't be shocked that this happened, right? Like they can't use that as just like an excuse in that way because they had full military control of the Gaza Strip the entire time. So.
166. The Commission has documented repeated public messages containing incitement published by Israeli officials. Messages include calling for violence against and the killing of Palestinians, the erasure of the Gaza Strip, vengeance, collective punishment, declaring that there are no innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip, planning for new Israeli settlements on the rubble of the Gaza Strip, and calling for the removal of Palestinians from Gaza to third states. I assume third states
Right.
like how they wanted to expel them from Egypt, expel them to Egypt and other
Mm-hmm.
places. I assume that's what that
Right.
means.
And then when the United States was said to be trying to facilitate also for like European countries to take Palestinian refugees in. Um, but yeah. Um, so several statements by Israeli officials advocated for collective punishment against the Palestinian people as a whole or the population of Gaza in particular. Some statements recognized that there was a difference between civilians and combatants, but urged that all Gazans should be punished for actions of the militants on 7th October 2023. These statements considered Hamas to be not only the militants, but also the civil and administrative officials and personnel and others who simply opposed the Israeli occupation. They regarded them all as legitimate targets of violence. Other statements made no distinction between civilians and combatants and decreed one punishment for all. And that is completely against internet. Like there's nothing, doesn't matter if it's for quote unquote self-defense, it doesn't matter, it does not matter. Like that is the principle of distinction and also of being hors de combat, right? Like if like once someone leaves the battlefield, once no one poses a threat to you, right? You can't still continue to attack them that because they can't attack you, right? Like if like when they go home and they're with their families and go to sleep, like they're obviously no threat to you. They're no longer a combatant in the field. They're hors de combat, right? Outside of combat. But one of the things that was like said, like actually this is how high tech and precise Israel is that they had the two AIs, right? But one particularly called, I think it was called like hey, Hello Daddy or something like that, which was to find and to, essentially calculate, um, striking people in essence in their homes. Um, and so that's why they use that very grim reference to, oh, like that it would be Hello Daddy, because essentially it would be when they were at home, right? And would be therefore not be considered combatants. The gospel, right? Yeah, the gospel was the first one, and then Hello Daddy was the second one that they use. I think the gospel is the one that calculates like targets, right? Like, oh, what threat level do they have? And then Hey Daddy is the one that actually like tries to establish a pattern to then of your movement, so then they can strike you when you are unprotected.
Ready? 168. Statements calling on Israel to exact vengeance against Hamas were made as early as 7th October 2023 at a press conference held in the early afternoon of 7th October 2023. Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to inflict the mighty vengeance on all the other places which Hamas has destroyed, hiding and operating in that wicked city. We will turn them into rubble. I say to residents of Gaza, leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. Although Netanyahu's statement carefully directed the call for vengeance at Hamas locations, his use of the phrase wicked city in the same statement implied that he saw the whole city of Gaza as responsible and a target for vengeance. He told Palestinians in Gaza to leave now as will operate forcefully everywhere, making no distinction between combatants and civilians, and knowing that Palestinians in Gaza had nowhere to go.
On 9th October 2023, Israel's then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who, according to the clients, or at least Hila, right, was a really good guy, announced a complete siege on Gaza, claiming that Israel was fighting quote unquote human animals, and Israel must quote unquote act accordingly. On 10th October 2023, in a speech to Israeli security forces personnel, Gallant stated, Gaza won't return to what it was before. There will be no Hamas. We will eliminate everything. If it doesn't take one day, it will take a week. If it will take weeks or even months, we will reach all places, end quote. I'll read the next little bit because it's short. On 13th October 2023, President Isaac Herzog stated, quote, it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians who were not aware or not involved. It's absolutely not true, end quote.
Yeah, yeah. Very um I'm I'm kind of interested as um well, I'm actually it's crazy that people after this were sometimes defending these statements.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
when it was like it just feels crazy. Um, and they would
Yeah.
still defend them. Like even
Right.
like even after all this stuff happened, like even after like it was like a year had passed and so much was destroyed, and then so much is destroyed, and it's like it's just crazy. Um, the I don't know, just people like people like Asmongold are allowed to kind of stream and make light of all this stuff.
Yeah, and then like with Yoav Galant, you had him being like, "Ein Chasman, Ein Magdol, Ein Maim, Ein Delek," right? Like literally saying like we are going to shut off every single thing that is sustainable of life. Ein Hashmal,
Yeah.
yeah, Ein Maim, Ein Delek. So no water, no fuel, no food, no medicine.
All right. On to 171. On the 29th October 2023, Brigadier General David Bar Khalifa, the commander of the 36th Armored Division, invoked divine interventions in a call for his soldiers to be guided by general vengeance in their military operation. In a handwritten letter to his soldiers, he said, what has been will be no more. We shall go out to it, the enemy, in war. We shall pulverize every accursed plot of land from which it came. We shall destroy it in the memory of it, and we shall not return until it is annihilated. And God doth render vengeance to his adversaries, and doth make expiation for the land of his people. The Lord will give strength to his people, and he shall guard thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and forever. This is our war. Today is our turn. Here we are.
Right, which is from the first book of Samuel. So invoking, which would later would also include, like the whole Amalek stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on 3rd November 2023, Prime Minister Netanyahu published a letter to the Israeli soldiers and commanders in the war in which he wrote, quote, "Remember what Amalek did to you. This is a war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. We constantly remember the sites of the horrific massacre that on Simchas Torah, Shabbat, October 7th, 2023. Simchas Torah is, just to sort of note really quickly, is like the new year of the Torah when you restart the Torah learning cycle, and it's a holiday. But the fact that it's Shabbat also means that like people, tend not to, um, well, one, it's like a holiday weekend, right? Like essentially, like that's um, so yeah, double day off essentially.
That is interesting. I did not know that. Also note, Discord kitten. Nothing happened. Nothing weird happened on VC. I put. Don't worry. I put that together. Don't worry. I put that together. Shakespeare will be back. Shakespeare. And this is your ad break in the middle. And who are we sponsored by? We're sponsored by Starbucks. Um, or something. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure your mic was muted. Uh, Richard. Okay, this is a leftist channel. I'm working on that. We will soon have music, but I have to figure out what music. I fucking have to make a playlist, and I don't. Okay. Uh, yeah, yeah, we can. All right. Well, not so Oedipus. If you have music recommendations, you can. I'll make a I'll make a little thing on my server, and you can send them there, and you can send them there. All right, and they will be under review. They will be pending review. But yeah, since Shakespeare said it's okay, we can just. I guess I'll just continue. The descendants of Amalek, the Amalekites, were enemies of the Israelites in the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Samuel, God tells the Israelites, "Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." The commission notes that in invoking Amalek in his speech, Netanyahu strengthened the idea that Israel's war in Gaza is akin to the holy war of total annihilation commanded against the Amalekites. This would be familiar to and compelling for the many thousands of Israeli military personnel who are religious Zionists, especially for those in military units whose personnel are wholly or predominantly ultra Orthodox. Indeed, such sentiments was referred to by many following the statement of Netanyahu, including the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, and Israeli soldiers who yelled and chanted direct references to Amalek as they launched attacks in Gaza. Yeah, okay, nothing leads, none of the footnotes on this page lead to any explanations, so we don't necessarily need to worry. Uh, Betz Al El. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, not so Oedipus. And then 173. On the 4th of November, 2023, Colonel Erez Eshel, a senior Israeli security forces officer, interviewed for an Israeli's news channel from Beit Lahia, said vengeance is a great value. There is vengeance for what they did to us. In 100 years, they will know that you don't mess with the Jews. It will take so many years to revive from this blow. This place will be a fallow land. They will not be able to live here. Oh my god. Uh, yeah. This, it's the thing that's the most shocking to me is, well, it's not shocking because it happened. The thing that's interesting about all this is how early on all this was, and how not subtle they were, and how even with the not subtle bits, people were still fucking defending them when they were saying this stuff. Uh, they were still doing it. They were still doing it. It's really bad. It's insane. 174. On the 8th November 2023, a video published on X showed soldiers from the Binyamin Brigade dancing and singing "Let Your Villages Burn." An Israeli security forces spokesperson responded to this incident saying, "The conduct of the soldiers is not consistent with the IDF orders and its values. The incident was investigated and dealt with accordingly through disciplinary action." On the 4th of January 2024, a video published on X depicted an Israeli security force soldier with a Torah scroll in his hand stating, "We are now on the ruins of Gaza with the grace of God. These Nazis will pay the price for what they did to the people of Israel and the country of Israel. We will destroy the Hamas. Do you see this burned house? Every house here will be burned. Every house had an RPG. They will pay for what they did. The people of Israel will win, and God will save us from them, with the grace of God." Uh,
I'm back.
Welcome back. I assume you're listening to the atrocities that were being talked about.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to lose my place.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't. I didn't actually finish. The commission is not aware of any disciplinary action undertaken by the Israeli security forces against these personnel. Yeah, so they're like, oh well, we'll do stuff. No. This will be under. This is what happening is it doesn't align with the conduct, and then just it's been over 2 years since the first incident that was cited here, the November 8th incident that was on video, and this doesn't seem like there's been any disciplinary action. So
Right, and one thing I want to add too is that uh, Israel tries to say that the reason why there's no need for the ICJ to do anything is the concept of complementarity, that the principle of complementarity, rather, saying like, well, we have fully competent courts that could hold people responsible, but the only person ever held responsible for anything so far, I don't know, maybe it's changed since then, was that someone stole a credit card. An IDF soldier stole a credit card. That's the only conviction that there ever was so far.
yeah, yeah. Uh, uh.
I can read the next one, unless we're going to
I was
respond.
just gonna read what Natsuda was saying. Ellie Sadan, or Ellie Sadan, who runs an important pre-military preparations school for the state religious, is now openly advocating for genocide in social media. This man taught dozens of thousands for years on years. And then Estelle asks, no one was convicted for sexual assault.
As far as I know, definitely not at Deteman, which is where
Well,
the,
there
you
you.
know, the where is actually where you had the, known incidents of sexual assault that happened against uh, men, and instead you had a rally for them in praise of them, actually.
Yeah. So well, then I guess the answer's no, Estelle, which is uh seems like the court systems
Right.
over there are working great for that for this.
Yeah. But yeah, it tells about a state of affairs when a credit card property theft is understood as a crime, but murdering children is not. No, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
curious. No, yeah.
But they will cite that and see like, see, we've actually convicted us, one of our own, quote unquote. So therefore you can just drop the ICC, warrants or whatever, and it's like, no.
And then Estelle said, "Excuse me for the comparison, but even the German army arrested its soldiers for sexual assault."
Right, they didn't have parades and protests in favor of them doing that, like for them to do it more. uh, Even against victims of the. Oh yeah, like there's a really good book by Tom Segev called The Seventh Million, and it essentially talks about how the Israelis have always mistreated Holocaust survivors. Like, one, after the foundation of the state of Israel, they outlawed the Yiddish language, which is what most Holocaust survivors would have spoken. Um, and then, you know, and also in Finkelstein's first book, The Holocaust Industry, talks about how um, when they were supposed to get reparations from Germany, in particular, um, they said, "Well, just give the money to the Jewish Agency for Israel because it's tied to the Israeli government, and then they will disperse the funds." But that never ended up happening. So that's why, like, if you are Jewish and have ever, sometimes you'll get like letters in the mail or whatever, like saying like, "Oh, do you want to help feed hungry Holocaust survivors in Israel?" And it's kind of like, what? Like that it was enforced. Yeah. Also, the B'nai David pre-military preparatory program is the first one in the country, the one founded by Eli Sadan. I see. And also calling it B'nai David, I mean, that means like the children of David. Like that's already also, particularly
Yeah.
because, Goliath and the Philistines, right? Like that language is very, so to speak, pregnant with meaning. Um, so
Um, and
let's see,
then I don't know
where,
if you
what?
remember 175, which is better to say.
Okay. On 15th August 2025, a recording of former head of Israel's military intelligence, who stepped down from his position in April 2024, was published by Israeli media. He stated that, quote, the fact that 50,000 have already been killed in Gaza is necessary and required for future generations, end quote. He added that for every Israeli killed on 7th October 2023, 50 Palestinians should die, and it does not matter if they are children, noting that, quote, they need a Nakba from time to time to feel the price. Which is also kind of strange too, because like Israel usually like I mean it says that like this person said that, but then also do Nakba denial like oh it never happened. So it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll read the next part. The Commission finds that many statements made by Israeli officials contain dehumanizing sentiments that encourage hatred towards Palestinians and violence against Palestinians, and are consistent with the patterns of conduct discussed below. It points to an intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a group. The Commission considers that these statements by Israeli officials are reasonably interpreted as statements expressing the intent to destroy the Palestinian group in Gaza, and they have been acted on as such by Israeli security forces in the Gaza Strip. They are direct evidence of dolus specialis. There is also indirect circumstantial evidence of dolus specialis in the pattern of conduct of Israeli political and military authorities and in military operations, establishing the required specific intent to commit genocide under the totality of evidence.
Yep. So we have indirect and direct evidence, indirect and circumstantial evidence, and direct evidence.
And then
Or
Natsu
they do.
Oedipus says they want to destroy the Palestinians, but then say no Palestinian people ever existed. It doesn't have to make much sense. No, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Uh,
Then
so now we're on part two, pattern of conduct.
pattern of conduct. And then 177. The Commission now analyzes whether the only reasonable inference that can be drawn from the pattern of conduct by the Israeli security forces in Gaza is evidence of genocidal intent. The Commission notes that Israeli authorities have claimed that their military operations in Gaza were conducted for military necessity and specifically as one, an exercise of self defense in response to the 7th October 2023 attack in Israel. Second, neutralization of Hamas to ensure long term security. And third, securing the safe release of Israeli hostages who have been detained in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. In a previous report, the Commission observed that Israeli authorities consistently presented military objectives for their operations in Gaza, yet their actions and their consequences indicated other motivations, including vengeance and collective punishment.
Uh, at the outset, the Commission notes that these events in Gaza since October 2023 have not occurred in isolation. They were preceded by decades of unlawful occupation and unlawful settlement with racial segregation or apartheid, under an ideology requiring the removal of the Palestinian population from their lands and their replacement. I should also note too, just from the last paragraph, that like one of those things too is Israel does not actually have the right to self-defense, like because it's occupied territory, right? Gaza, it cannot claim that it's fighting a quote unquote war of self-defense. That's literally impossible, um, because they are the occupying power. And so that's why the judgment by the ICJ, the advisory opinion of last year, sort of put an end to that kind of like, but does it have a right to defend itself? No, it doesn't. Under Article 51 of the UN Charter, it does not have that because it is an occupying power. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then 179. Sorry, I keep just going, yeah, yeah. I just keep thinking about everyone who just kept defending Israel and kept just like talking about this stuff when this stuff was uh just pretty blatant really early on. Um uh Jim talked about it. Jim talked about it, but not Jim, sorry. I'm losing it. I think not so Oedipus said it, but it's just like or no, I think Estelle actually said it. Um that they just like it's not even something that was like trying to be hidden. It was out there in the open, obvious. And
yeah,
so yes, sorry if I keep just going, yeah, yeah, I just keep thinking about all this and I keep thinking about all everyone who just has defended this that I've heard. I they it's just I'm like just crazy. And then Estelle DM'd me and said, um, my comment didn't go through the YouTube chat filter. Well, but she was trying to say, well, the only way they could be able to say that Palestinians never existed is by destroying them.
right.
Yeah. Also, let me.
You should mod
Do you mind?
me and Estelle.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. Boop. We'll do that. I don't know what these different terms mean, but we'll do. We'll do that.
The managing mod is just has more things that they can access.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't care. Sure. And then Natsuda says, in today's media atmosphere, you don't need to hide, but only deny. Yeah, also, I really don't like that that did that because I'm pretty sure when I set up my my stream things, I'll probably have to mess with that later. The settings, I'm pretty sure I set the like auto moderation to like as minimal as I could. I didn't I didn't want that to happen because I didn't want it to ban stuff because for just us, for just people just making statements that just kind of need to be said.
Right. Well, at least now the mods can help with some of that. So do you want to continue on 179?
Yes, yes. Oh, fucking someone. While the commission concluded that many statements made by Israeli officials are direct evidence expressing an intent to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza, the commission nevertheless analyzed the circumstantial evidence, taking into account the totality of the evidence, the pattern of conduct of the Israeli authorities and the Israeli security forces. Applying the legal standards set forth by the International Court of Justice, the commission assessed all the evidence in totality from the 7th of October 2023 to the 31st July 2025. The commission concludes, based on the analysis below, that there was no military necessity to justify the pattern of conduct. And then we get to a new section. A.
Killing and causing bodily or mental harm. So these are specific things that are a part of the Genocide Convention that they are, explicitly wanting to call out. So the large group of the large number of victims killed and injured may be relevant to infer genocidal intent to destroy a group. The Commission has found that the Israeli security forces have intentionally killed and seriously harmed an unprecedented number of Palestinians since 7th October 2023 using heavy munitions. Since 7 October 2023, the Israeli security forces have been targeting civilians directly and killing them in far larger numbers compared to previous conflicts, using weapons and munitions that have caused many times the number of casualties. The destruction has been more severe than anything the Palestinians in Gaza have experienced previously. It is evident in the military strategy of using unguided bombs and other heavy munitions in densely populated areas in Gaza, which is, these are all war crimes, right? And the systemic and widespread targeting and destruction of civilian objects, also war crimes, crimes against humanity, with clear knowledge that Palestinians were present therein, like, for example, like the Church of St. Porphyrius. Um, the methods of war and types of weapons used show a consistent pattern that caused and was intended to cause a large number of casualties, including deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. It is important to note that more than 50% of those who were killed were women, children, or elderly persons, indicating that the Israeli security forces have deliberately targeted Palestinian civilians. Additionally, Israeli intelligence officials have reportedly listed 8,900 militants from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza as dead or probably dead as of May 2025. Considering that at that point, 53,000, at least the ones that were officially counted, have been killed by Israeli attacks, it means that 83% of those killed in Gaza were civilians. So by saying that, the Israelis actually, told on themselves, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's I don't know. It's just all crazy. Just all feels feels really weird considering uh considering yeah, just everything.
Mhm.
And then sorry, I'm just at a loss of words. Just at a loss of words reading this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will admit it's not exactly like the rosiest subject to talk about. It's very
No, no,
difficult, so.
no, no. Yeah, I'm just. I don't know. Just like I said, one of the things that just like keep thinking about is just all the people who've just treated this like it was. Oh, this is just normal. This is just normal. And stuff like that and that. Well, it's just all okay. But 181. The commission also assessed the conduct of the Israeli security forces in the statements made by Israeli officials on and from the 18th of March 2025, when Israel broke the ceasefire and resumed its military operations in Gaza. OCHA reported that more than 404 Palestinians were killed in half a single day on the 18th of March 2025 as of midday. Nearly 60% of them women and children. More than 562 were injured. Since then, there have been very high numbers of deaths and injuries, continuing the highly disproportionate ratio of women and children killed and harmed compared with men. The Commission finds that Israeli security forces' resumption of the military operations in violation of an existing ceasefire is indicative of the Israeli authorities' intention to continue the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza as a group by killing and injuring them and inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction.
Yeah. So, like, it's very important that they note that because, again, like, um, it notes, right? Even though Israel will always say, "Oh, it was Hamas that broke the ceasefire," like it's saying even now, um, is that yeah, I mean, more than 404 people were killed in just a single day, and that was at noon, more or less, when that recording of the casualties ended. So with such a high rate of them being people that are not traditionally considered combatants, right, that also speaks to um, Israel sort of going through that. And also inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction. I mean, like, one thing is like the disruption of families, the murder of possible, mothers, etc., right? Like all of those things, but also like the destruction of families is another thing that's included in that. Importantly, the commission notes that in many instances, soldiers were also targeted, I should say, and killed Palestinians during the evacuation process and within areas already designated safe by the Israeli forces.
You want to read the next two sections as well, since you've been getting the short sections. You
Yeah.
can.
As detailed above, the Commission also concludes that many Palestinians in and from Gaza have suffered and will continue to suffer serious long-term mental harm due to the Israeli security forces' military operations. Which I would just like to add, as if they weren't already suffering from it, like prior to October 7th, right? Like it's kind of never ended, but you know, yeah. The Commission notes that in most cases, Israeli authorities did not investigate the cases where Palestinians were killed or injured due to military personnel. Um, in fact, Israeli authorities often shielded the military actions taken by the Israeli forces with narratives that changed when conflicting evidence were presented. In most, if not all instances, Israeli authorities defend the Israeli security forces and claim that Israel has always adhered to international humanitarian law, which is just an absolute lie, when it conducts its military operations. Um, Israeli leaders have power to prevent and punish the crimes committed by the soldiers. The commission has not received any evidence that Israeli officials have conducted any genuine investigation into the allegations of crimes committed by soldiers, air crew, naval crew, or other security personnel. So, that obviously includes secretaries, Hila. No, I'm just joking, but um, on the contrary, the Commission has collected evidence that Israeli officials have publicly supported the actions of military personnel and defended their conduct, hence encouraging, permitting, and authorizing such criminal behavior to continue. In some cases where Israeli authorities announced the launch of an investigation, the Commission has found that these investigations were not genuine and did not lead to accountability, which tears a hole in everything that like Lonerbox has ever said, that like, oh well, the Israelis, they actually do start these things and they actually do all of those stuff, like uh and the other thing too was like, well, you don't know how high up the chain of command, blah blah blah. It's like, this says all the way, individual soldiers all the way up to the Minister of Defense. So the
Yeah.
entire defense apparatus is.
Before we continue, Pippa says Israel's rhetoric is well considered in practice. The right to defend itself, do you condemn Hamas, etc. They've been doing this for decades. It's easy for people on social media to parrot and difficult for others to counter. Yeah.
Right. Right.
I think it's something to kind of talk about. They kind of do the thing that you'll find some, not necessarily conspiracy theorists, but some conspiracy adjacent types doing, where they'll say things and they will, like it said, they will contradict themselves, and be those contradictions lead to you having to suss out like so much that you get lost in kind of your own response. You because you end up having to respond to so much, and it becomes just really hard
Right.
to just like a counter effectively, especially in
Yeah.
public. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then 185. Importantly,
Okay.
Israeli authorities. Are you saying?
Oh no, I just said okay. Fine.
Okay. Importantly, Israeli authorities have repeatedly attempted to change the narrative of incidents by concealing information. For example, in relation to the 23rd March 2025 incident in which Israeli forces killed first responders in the Tal As-Sultan area and attempted to bury the evidence, the commission notes that it was 5 days after the incident and only when the rescue team had discovered one of the bodies of the first responders that Israel issued a statement, claiming that the vehicle had been suspicious and that the Israeli security forces had eliminated several Hamas terrorists. On the 31st March 2025, one day after the other 14 bodies were found, an Israeli military spokesperson claimed that the Israeli security forces had opened fire at uncoordinated vehicles that were identified advancing suspiciously without headlights or emergency signals, adding that a total of 9 Palestinian militants had been eliminated. Notably, these assertions were subsequently proven false. One, upon the publication of the video that was taken by a first responder in the convoy before he was killed, and two, the corroborative statements provided by witnesses. After the publication of the video, an Israeli military official admitted the person who gives the initial account is mistaken, and that investigation was continuing. The commission has found that the lack of transparency, delay in Israeli authorities' reaction and action are indicative of their intention not only to deflect responsibility for a crime their forces attempted initially to conceal, but coupled with the constant denial of the facts, also of their intention to continue to conceal information to continue their military operations. And if you want, I'll
Right.
read the
And
last
then
sentence too.
okay.
Once you're done saying so, I assume you're gonna say something after that.
I was just gonna say Natsu Oedipus says you're not wrong to think of conspiracy theorists. They both have an answer for which everything for everything which comes naturally.
Yeah, it's they're never wrong. You're always right.
And also,
Um,
this was a huge thing as well, like with the footage of October 7th. Like again, um, we know that there was a Hannibal directive, right? This is something that and Ynet was brought up in their, as well as other people that have been, like especially if they were um, like laid off essentially or like forced to retire or whatever it might be. Um, a lot of people then came out and said like, yeah, we actually did do XYZ and we shot at anybody. In fact, from what I remember from that research that was done, the day of the 7th of October, like the Israeli Air Force was joining like WhatsApp groups to try to determine where stuff was happening. And then there was other evidence of people where it's like they survived, which they'll be like, oh, good, we have a survivor. But then they're also like, they don't like that. On the Israelis don't like that because then they'll say like, oh yeah, Israel, its tanks are the ones which you know uh, shot at this house, right? And that was something that was contradicted by one of um one of the people that was first brought up on the news, that was from the IDF, that oh here we found these children and they were to get blah blah blah. I'm not going to go into the details, but later on it made no sense because the blast came from the outside. So it was like, well, the only way you could have done that is if people that were not inside the building did something. So, stuff like that.
and then 186. Taking into account the mass killings of Palestinians in Gaza, the resulting serious bodily and mental harm, and the lack of accountability, the Commission finds that there is a consistent pattern that clearly shows the intent to physically destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a group. Um,
Okay.
and if I am not mistaken, uh, uh, for this to be for something to be considered a genocide, does it only have to meet one of these standards? It has to meet
Um,
one of the A through E standards. There's five, I think,
yeah,
and then it has
there
to
are
meet
five
other
acts
stuff.
that are
Yeah,
specifically, yeah, there are five acts that are um, genocide shall be considered to include the five following acts committed in whole and or in part,
yeah,
against a racial, national, ethnical group, etc. And then it enumerates them, and so that's why you have causing physical and bodily and mental harm. So for B, this is like an additional layer that's added on top of that because it's not something that is directly that, but people would argue that, and people have argued successfully, um, that destroying cultural, religious, and educational structures and such that is part of the mental harm, right? So the extensive and systematic destruction of Palestinian homes and structures in Gaza, including agricultural lands and other properties that are indispensable to Palestinian life, also supports the conclusion that the military operations were part of the intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. Importantly, the destruction of cultural and religious sites is relevant to infer genocidal intent, even though such acts do not necessarily constitute an underlying act of genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. The Commission has found in a previous report that the damage to historical buildings, monuments, and other tangible heritage in Gaza signified a clear disregard for Palestinian people's religious beliefs, culture, and heritage. The Commission has found that these acts constitute war crimes, including 1. Intentionally directing attacks against buildings dedicated to religion and education and historic monuments, 2. Intentionally directed attacks against civilian objects that are not military objectives or justified by military necessity or not imperatively demanded by the necessities of the conflict. And I'll just finish this section up. The Commission has noted that the systematic and widespread attack on religious, cultural, and education sites throughout Gaza since 7th October 2023 and has found that these attacks have caused extensive and in many cases irreparable damage to the sites. The Commission has found that these attacks were aimed at causing irreversible harm to Palestinians in Gaza by destroying elements of the Palestinian people's identity and erasing Palestinian culture from Gaza, which is why, for example, like the churches were attacked, mosques were attacked, museums were attacked, the central archives of Gaza were attacked, and also every university has been in Gaza has been destroyed. So
yeah. I guess starting to seem like Lunarbox is wrong after all.
who would have thought?
Couldn't who yeah who would have thought who would have thought? And then C, siege, starvation, the blocking of humanitarian aid. The Commission finds that Israel used starvation as a method of warfare by imposing a total siege on Gaza and blocking humanitarian aid from entering into Gaza. The effects of the siege on Palestinians in Gaza, who were already heavily reliant on aid prior to the 7th of October 2023, have been dire, leading to warnings by experts and international bodies, including the International Court of Justice. It is important to note that Palestinians in Gaza have continued to suffer the effects of the total siege, which encompass the cutting of food and water, fuel, electricity, and medical supplies into Gaza, even after occasions when Israel permitted very limited humanitarian aid to enter. At no time has aid been adequate to sustain life in Gaza. The denial of entry for special infant milk, resulting in the starvation of newborn and young infants, is especially powerful evidence of an intention to destroy the population.
One thing I will say is like there was like when they published the lists of the deceased, it's I don't even know how to put it, but it's like something. It's just like this sinking feeling that when you see that so many people's names they like when it says their age, it just says 0, right? Because they were just
Yeah.
born and it's just an unbelievable
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
The Commission finds that Israel has failed to enable and ensure the unhindered provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance at scale, as well as medical supplies and medical care to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israeli authorities have been aware through various reports and warnings by UN agencies, human rights organizations, and the International Court of Justice orders of the imminent risks of malnutrition and starvation in Gaza. The Commission reiterates that through the food consumption in the Gaza Strip Red Line document, Israeli authorities are aware of the amount of calories needed by Palestinians in Gaza to avoid malnutrition, which is why they used to, like, they wanted to calculate that. They wanted, which is like a very, like a, it's I don't know, maybe I might be overstressing it, but it's like, to me, it's like, it's such a open, I guess, or like when it comes to like the idea of biopolitics, right? It's
Yeah.
like, how is that not like an example of that, right? Um, The Commission therefore finds that the action to allow some humanitarian aid into Gaza since 7th October 2023, but not at scale, was a facade by the Israeli authorities to show the international community that the Israeli authorities had allowed a minimal amount of aid into Gaza while continuing to 1. Impose starvation and inhumane living conditions on the Palestinians, and 2. Physically targeting Palestinians in Gaza.
192. It is important to note that the provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice in the South Africa v. Israel case under the Genocide Convention and Israel's reaction to such orders. As early as 26th of January 2024, the International Court of Justice considered that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further before the court renders its final judgment. The International Court of Justice ordered Israel to take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance in Gaza. Strict limitations on and interference with the entry of humanitarian assistance and attacks on humanitarian convoys continued after the order. Some of the attacks resulted in casualties of destruction of aid. For example, an incident reported by UNRWA on the 5th of February 2024, an UNRWA food convoy of 10 trucks was traveling along Al Rashid Road from south to northern Gaza and was hit by Israeli security forces' naval gunfire. Okay, yeah. Just checking.
And And that's like one of those things too, where it's like, because all of the roads that they want people to use are like Al Mawasi, which is like the part of Gaza that they move people to, um, actually is like very vulnerable because it's like exposed, because essentially it's like a flat beach and like there's like sand dunes and stuff, so it's like there's nowhere like the ability to build housing, the ability to do like, all of these basic things are just like unavailable. So there's that too, but also all the roads, right? They wanted everything within range essentially of also like the Navy, for example, like as this notes. So let's see here. On 28th March 2024, the International Court of Justice issued a second order on provisional measures. Um, The International Court of Justice observed that since it had issued the first order on provisional measures on 26 January 2024, the catastrophic living conditions in Gaza had deteriorated further, particularly in the catastrophic living conditions. Oh, pardon me, particularly in the prolonged and widespread deprivation of food and basic necessities. I should also note, like, because they were talking about like limited aid and stuff like that, like one of the things that the state of Israel was like, oh look, we're gonna let in this or, like they let in very little things, that people still have to buy those things. Like they have to buy it on a market, um, and also like they might allow some water, right? But one of the things is that the state of Israel, like the IDF, has destroyed all of their water. Um, Sanitation infrastructure, and has also like polluted the polluted the water table. So like all surface water is polluted. There's effluent all over the place. Yeah, the free market will take care of it all, right? Yeah, that's right, Estelle.
Yeah, but I don't know much about you know water pollution, but I assume polluting the water table is not a good thing, and I don't know if it's possible how possible it is to really unpollute it to any like really safe degree that it might have been at before, but I assume either way that
Yeah,
if
I
it
mean,
is, it's a really long time like before that could even
yeah,
happen.
yeah, and again with the pollution by way of the sewage that's just been running on the streets means that like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, everything is bad. Um, okay. Where did I leave off? There we go. Um, the International Court of Justice observed the Palestinians in Gaza were not only facing a risk of famine, but that famine is settling in. The International Court of Justice ordered Israel to take all necessary and effective measures uh, to ensure, without delay, the full cooperation with the United Nations, the unhindered provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, as well as medical supplies and medical care. There is a much stronger order than that for the first provisional measures, which only ordered, or this is a much stronger order than the original, the first provisional measures, which only ordered Israel to enable the provision of those services and assistance. Far from cooperating with the United Nations, however, Israel responded by prescribing and excluding the principal UN agency providing aid and humanitarian assistance, UNRWA. The International Court of Justice also ordered that the Israeli military, quote, not commit crimes which constitute a violation of any of the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza as a protected group under the Genocide Convention, end quote, including by preventing delivery of urgently needed humanitarian assistance. Like, the fact that there are so many people that are not getting the humanitarian assistance also goes to the evidence that they are committing genocide, right? In fact, this is why like a huge narrative in the Israeli thing is like, oh, we wanted to flood Gaza with humanitarian aid, but Hamas kept stealing, whatever, blah blah blah, right? Like they kept saying the same typical stuff, but uh, like this all goes against them when it comes to like actual court proceedings. It will be held against them. So there's that. But also, the other thing is that this is UNRWA was chosen, by the United States and Israel because initially it was supposed to be the gosh, I'm forgetting the name now. Was it the International Refugee Council, the IRC? Um, but because they had helped Jewish refugees, right, and other refugees in Europe because of the Holocaust, but the state of Israel didn't want them to be in Palestine from the jump because they already had this view that yeah they were doing similar stuff to what was happening in Germany, or what had happened because of Germany. So that's why. So even UNRWA was like, the fact that they're attacking UNRWA when they're the ones that wanted UNRWA in the first place, also speaks volumes, I would say. Um,
Well, they simply discovered that UNRWA was Hamas.
right. Yeah. See, if they would have known that.
Yeah, if they would have known that, they wouldn't have chosen him. But Hamas is everywhere. Hamas may be in our chat right now. We don't know. 194. On the 24th May 2024, the International Court of Justice issued a third order on provisional measures. The International Court of Justice noted that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip had deteriorated and is now to be characterized as disastrous. The International Court of Justice ordered Israel to immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate, which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The International Court of Justice also ordered Israel to take effective measures to ensure the unimpeded access to the Gaza Strip of any commission of inquiry, fact-finding mission, or other investigative body mandated by competent organs of the United Nations to investigate allegations of genocide. The Commission notes that it is a union-mandated investigative body to which this order is applied. However, to date, Israel has not responded to the Commission's request to access Gaza to conduct its investigations therein.
Yeah, and this also again goes like they keep saying, oh, well, we have to keep it all like hermetically sealed and everything like that for safety or whatever. They've made up so many different reasons, but this is also why they never allowed international journalists in unless they went with the IDF.
Yeah.
And so, and in fact, it was interesting because of one of their little like joy rides, as I will call it, with a reporter, they actually showed the date that Israel itself was committing war crimes because they were putting their tanks and stuff um, in a school building, which is in essence them recognizing that Hamas would actually uphold international law and not attack it, whereas the Israelis wouldn't uphold international law and would attack schools and such, right? But yeah, literally have like the tanks and essentially like a base in the courtyard of a former school. So
No, don't be silly. Hamas actually destroyed all of the religious sites, and Israel's innocent. Hamas would never do that. I mean,
just the
Israel would never
pattern of
do that.
never. And we, of course, at least in my server, we praise, honor, and cherish our Lord and Savior Henry Kissinger. Um, As the pattern of conduct shows, Israel has had no intention to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians and instead implemented a total and partial siege of Gaza. On the contrary, and despite numerous warnings, including those that emanated from the International Court of Justice through its provisional orders that are binding on Israel, Israeli authorities have not only failed to facilitate the unimpeded access of humanitarian aid into Gaza, but they have continued the restriction or total blockade of humanitarian aid, including food and water, fuel and power, medical supplies and equipment with other essential items and services from entering into Gaza. While they have permitted some humanitarian aid to enter Gaza at some stages intermittently, such action was short-lived, insufficient, and often severely restricted through stringent security checks. It's like definitely can't let cookies in because you never know. Might be used to fire rockets using the sugar. Palestinians have been targeted and killed when they were trying to obtain humanitarian assistance from aid trucks, such as the Flower massacre. Tellingly, from 2nd March 2025 to 19th May 2025, Israel did not permit any food, water, fuel, or medicine, or any commercial supplies into Gaza. So, I mean, think about that. That's over 2 months of nothing. And again, we've already discussed how there already is no food. All of the farmland and all that stuff has been just destroyed, and water. Well, all the water is contaminated. So, let alone anything else.
Sewage.
Despite the
Also, you
repeat,
mentioned sewage, which means even without the water being contaminated, like disease is going to spread a lot more easily, and so with no medicine, Things
Right.
will if with like even limited water and food, like that would already be disastrous. But no water and food,
Yeah. No
along
water
with
and
medicine.
food. Right. And also medical equipment. So like if
Yep.
people need hemodialysis or any of those other
Yep.
things, they can't get it. So that's also a cause of a lot of deaths as well, because if people had any other conditions, they Shax, did not so is asking, Shax, do you know how Douglas Murray would respond to what you're saying? I have no idea, besides probably calling me a self-hating Jew, because that seems to be like the typical line. Um, uh, yeah. Israel, yeah. Despite repeated calls for the allowance of humanitarian aid into Gaza, including by the UN Secretary General and several member states, that's what he'd say. Hamas. Yeah.
And then 196. On May 19th, 2025, after 11 weeks of complete blockade, Israel eventually permitted a few aid trucks into Gaza. According to the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, this was merely a drop in the ocean of what is urgently needed. Furthermore, the aid that was permitted to enter was cherry picked by the Israeli authorities and did not include all types of aid desperately needed by the Palestinians. By 22nd June 2025, OCHA reported that nearly 9,000 metric tons of wheat flour were brought into Gaza since 19th May. Most of it was taken by people in need of aid en route, and in some cases by armed elements before reaching its final destinations. Since then, humanitarian aid has been extremely restricted by Israeli authorities, and requests for humanitarian access have been repeatedly denied.
Yeah. And one thing too is like there are people that willingly went, and in fact, they're the ones that wrote the report that Lunarbox later said, like, actually, maybe he said toddler, but he actually meant like a 50-year-old man or something. Like, I don't know, it was something like, obviously, when he said, toddlers were being harmed, were being shot, it actually was, like a grown man. That was obviously a Hamas fighter, but people get confused sometimes, obviously. Yeah, that's what he'd say for sure. Um, but like any, these were doctors that were volunteering at the different hospitals, whether it was Al Ahli or um, uh, just all the other ones, or Nasser Hospital or whichever hospital that there might be. So essentially, or and then the embattled Al Shifa Hospital. Um, uh, so yeah, so they often had to do surgeries without anesthetics, right? Without local anesthetic, without anesthesia. I mean, this stuff was all horrifying
Yeah,
because Israel won't let it in. So even though they're I mean, these are top surgeons. These are people that are
yeah,
doing this literally out of the goodness of their heart, and they're doing it for people that desperately need it. They've had to do things in ways that um, they have been compelled to do things in ways that we recognize as being inhumane,
yeah.
which is not the fault of the doctor nor the patient, but the occupation.
I remember
Um,
the I remember the one report by the one thing by that doctor who was talking about how there was talks of, I think, drones shooting at targeting children, and like
mhm,
little children would come in and with like bullet wounds and stuff like that,
yeah,
and just
yeah.
crazy.
And they'd often say like, "Oh, it was an accident. It was blah blah blah," but nobody. I mean, this is stuff that even people that are in like that are in the military that they have said, and I'm just saying it because again, people that are analysts have said this, right? And this was even the Al Jazeera documentary. You don't aim for the head,
Yeah,
right? Like typically you aim for the torso because you're most likely to get that shot.
yeah,
So the fact that they are actually aiming for people's heads shows that it is intentional, right? It shows a level of intent even higher than if, not that if they were shot in the torso it would lessen the severity, but it just speaks to the genocidal intent. Um, the intention of the Israeli authorities to continuously impose starvation and unlivable conditions of life for Palestinians in Gaza is also evident through the establishment of the use of the GHF to maintain total control over aid distribution in Gaza. Notably, I think, isn't it called like the Global Humanitarian Foundation or something like that? That's what it stands for. Does not distribute any essential items other than food. So no water, no fuel, nothing else, just food. And all 4 distribution sites are in militarized zones, none of which is situated in northern Gaza, making it extremely difficult and at times impossible for many Palestinians to access food. I want to note here, before October 7th, right, and Gaza City is where over half of the population of the Gaza Strip lived, right? It was like over 1 million people. So the fact that they have nothing available where most people live also says a lot, I will say. Notably, on 29th July 2025, the IPC warned that the worst case scenario of famine is currently playing out um, in the Gaza Strip, and on 22nd August 2025, the IPC FRC stated that the man-made famine is currently occurring in the Gaza Governorate. It is projected that famine thresholds would be crossed in the Deir al-Bala and Khan Yunis governorates, quote, in the coming weeks. And this was a long time ago. So this was a while ago. This was in November. Furthermore, since the GHF took over aid distribution in Gaza, at least 859 Palestinians were killed, mostly by the Israeli military, in the vicinity of GHF distribution sites as of 31st July 2025. The Commission notes that its investigation into the incidents at the GFH sites is ongoing.
And before we
Yeah.
continue,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna read what Estelle and Karasu were saying. Estelle says it disallows the possibility of it being accidental. They aiming for the head and
Right,
the stuff, and then Karasu said it is not even head or not. The doctor said there are patterns, as if they would toy
right.
around. So it's impossible to make a missed aim at that time with all the same body parts, then other time all the same of the other body part. And this is why I'm so angry at that Loner Box defended this.
No, right. I mean, like, that's the reason that, again, like, the whole point about being a sniper is that, like, for the, like, one of the thing, well, in the United States, right, like, for when it comes to the Marines, I believe, it's literally one shot, one kill, right? Like, the whole point
Yeah,
is being a sniper means that, once you take your shot, you leave because otherwise now you've compromised your position, right? Like, that's the whole point. So the fact that they can do this right with sniper rounds and everything speaks to the fact that, again, like, this idea that 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 they're not occupiers, that they don't have total control over everything, but also the fact that they do have that control and will attack children, right? And Karasu is right. Like, it does not matter that if it was in the body or the neck or the head,
yeah,
but the neck, but the head specifically, since it's not what standard practice, right, speaks to the fact that, and again, yeah, it's why, like, when Lonerbox does defend or has defended this, it's nonsensical because these doctors weren't even all at the same hospital, right? Like, they were,
yeah,
and they weren't like, oh, they're all Palestinian, which I don't think would matter if they were Palestinian American, like, like one of the main ones, the one I think that he was like quoting and saying like, oh, he actually meant adult Hamas fighter by saying toddler, was Jewish,
yeah,
right? So, like, it has nothing to do, like, which I think is also a very sinister thing for Lonerbox to be doing, to be like, oh, people have ethnic bias, or you know what I mean? Like, that speaks very negatively of his argument there, but that's all I'll say.
yeah. And also, Richard, thank you for joining. If you want, the
Yeah,
VOD will
thank you,
obviously
Richard.
be made available. Um, so you can watch this after you get back if you want. But yeah, no, it was yeah, everyone who's been staying for this stuff. We've been going for fucking almost 2 hours now. Thank you, thank you for staying because I think this is really important, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this, even though I'm not necessarily saying that much, but and Shakespeare's not necessarily always saying that much, but I do think it's in this stuff I think is important to go over, and I'll probably be doing more stuff like this because I like this along with my reading stuff, which I will continue.
And then Karasu says, "Yeah, one of the doctors I listed the account is the Britisher." Yeah, this is the most sinister stuff I've seen around this subject. Yeah, yeah, it's very strange. Um, but I mean, it's just already I mean, it just completely undoes any argument that is being said by it because it's not no, like if you want, so that way we don't, go too far. Why don't we just read up to um 200? So we'll read to 199, and then another time we can finish up going down from 200 down because we've read a
If
lot of
you
paragraphs.
if you want, I would not mind finishing. I'm totally down. Um, but otherwise, yeah, totally we can stop. But if you don't mind finishing, I wouldn't mind finishing since I
Oh
think
yeah,
we
no, I don't.
only since I think we only have 4 pages left. Since I think you said the
Yeah,
conclusion was 64.
yeah, it's very very short, the conclusion.
Yeah,
So yeah,
so I totally don't mind, but just yeah, I was like in my head when we started this, I was like, oh, it's gonna go for like an hour and a half maybe, and
yeah.
it's just uh, clearly not very good at measuring how long it takes to read things because
No
I
worries.
remember
Yeah,
yeah.
no, but I was gonna say just no worries. Yeah, we can finish it up because I was just trying to be considerate of your time as well. Like I didn't know if you had something.
No,
Um,
I'm free.
okay. Importantly, the Commission finds a connection between the laws voted by the Knesset in October 2024, intended to cripple UNRWA's operations in Gaza, and the establishment of the GHF in 2025, intended to control the distribution of food aid in Gaza. And again, just to reiterate, this new agency, right, that's Trump promoted and everything, they only distribute food. And there have been reports that the food that they do give is like out of, it's like expired and stuff like that. And so it's um, both represent interconnected political and politicized, which I think it's important that they do make that distinction, right? Because there are politicized things and then there's political things, right? Like, so looking at things which are ideologically colored a certain way with politicized, with political things like actions as such. Measures of the Israeli authorities undertaken to block and obstruct trusted aid agencies and maintain complete Israeli dominance over the Palestinians' access to essential and life-saving aid, and ultimately bring about the physical destruction of the Palestinians in Gaza through unlivable conditions of life in the Gaza Strip. Because we also have to remember, right? Like even they will even shoot people that are foreign citizens, right? Like Americans, British. Like it doesn't matter because they did that with the World Central Kitchen, right? Where it's like they were telling the Israelis where they were the whole time. They had everything right. They were constantly pinging. They were like essentially on the phone with the IDF, more or less. Like they weren't necessarily actually on the phone, but like they were completely like constantly giving away their location, saying what they had in their stuff, blah blah blah. The Israelis knew everything. They still shot them. And then they said, "Oh, it's because Hamas or whatever." But it's like that's another thing too. It's like it's not even just the blocking of aid; it's also that they will attack aid workers, and so many of them have been UN workers as well. But the most notable one, I think, is the World Central Kitchen. You know, I'll read 199 because it's pretty short. Far from enabling and ensuring provision of aid, the Israeli security forces have continued to prevent entry of all humanitarian assistance. And I want to do a highlight all, if that, right? And to target humanitarian aid convoys and aid workers inside of Gaza, like World Central Kitchen, in flagrant disregard for the International Court of Justice's orders.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing I will say though about the ICJ is that Israel was supposed to submit a report quite a while ago. Um, but they've let them keep like pushing it back and pushing it back. I forgot how long they have until now, but it's like until next year. And they were supposed to have already submitted it like in 2024 or early 2025.
Yeah.
But they never did. So they just keep like letting them defer it and defer it and defer it. And I think to me that's something that just needs to stop. I mean, like literally, I mean, what else can they write? I mean, if it's just going to be Hasbah, just at least just turn it in, right? It's like at least just turn in
Yeah.
the assignment. It's like who cares what grade you get? Just turn in the assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, not sure how to say. Streamers don't need to say much. Streaming allows for freedom and length for the petition. Yeah. Yeah. If I don't have anything I can say, I don't generally like to say anything. I don't like to just bullshit. I don't. It feels very unnatural, and it feels like a waste of people's time when I could just be reading something like this. Which a lot of it just kind of speaks for itself. You don't really need to add much besides further details like Shakespeare's been adding. And so it's, yeah. 200. Further, Israeli authorities are aware that Palestinians in Gaza, almost 80% of whom are from families that were previously forced to flee to Gaza as refugees, are now trapped in Gaza and have nowhere to flee outside Gaza, even if they wanted to do so. The entrapment of the Palestinian population in Gaza has had increasingly severe consequences as the fighting has continued and is now more destructive than ever. On the 5th of May 2025, the Israeli Security Cabinet decided on an intense operation in Gaza, allegedly to defeat Hamas and return Israeli hostages. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that the operation will involve moving the population for its protection to southern Gaza and that the Israeli security forces will not leave areas which it will take over. Between 5th and 21st of May 2025, the Israeli security forces carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Gaza, purportedly against terror targets. Their ground operations escalated greatly on the 18th of May 2025. As a result, approximately 161,000 Palestinians were displaced between the 15th and the 21st of May 2025. Unwere noted that as of the 1st of August 2025, at least 1.9 million people have been internally displaced since October 2023, which represents about 99% of the 2.1 million people in Gaza. This includes 767,000 people displaced since 767,000 people displaced since the 18th of March 2025. As of July 2025, 87.7% of the Gaza Strip is within Israeli militarized zone and are placed under displacement orders. Yeah, literally,
And like, mhm.
everyone. It's everyone.
Yeah, it's everyone. Like, it's the reason why when they try to say, oh, that they're actually being very specific and targeted, it's like, no, you're just targeting. Like, that's just it. Like, you're just targeting everybody. But one other thing to note is that, again, like Sudan, right, which is another, uh, area where there is a lot of stuff going on, including, potential genocide is that, and I say that in the language of the court, right, of the International Court of Justice, um, is that particularly in Darfur, but anyway, is that they have the largest number of people that are internally displaced, right? But because Palestine includes the West Bank, right? If we were to just limit it to Gaza, it would be the most displaced population just ever by proportion. Um, Right. So proportionately, it's immensely internally displaced, let alone all of the destruction of the housing that is there, which again has always been multi generational. So that's why, like, when certain scholars like Finkelstein, etc., gave estimates of that it would take, 350 years, more or less, to build back Gaza to the way it was on October 6th, 2023. It's quite. It just shows how dire the situation is, because
Yeah.
even if they have a ceasefire, or even if they do sign a peace thing, right, a peace treaty or whatever it might be, not a treaty, but a permanent ceasefire, Israel will still not allow things that they, in order to build housing stock anymore, because they haven't, right? They haven't allowed concrete. Always with the thing of like, oh, well, this is Hamas. This is how Hamas builds tunnels, right? Stuff like that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Sudanese. Oh yes, Douglas Murray says. Um, the commission highlights that since the beginning of the Israeli military operations on October 23rd, 2023, the attacks against Palestinians and the creation of unbearable conditions of life in Gaza were imposed by Israeli authorities on the population with the knowledge and awareness that Palestinians were trapped therein and are unable to escape. Another thing too is like, people will often say like, why doesn't Egypt take in, right? And it's like, I forget, I think it's 11 border crossings, if not more, that Israel has closed. But there were two, right? One, Kerem Shalom, and then Erez, which is on the northern part of the Gaza Strip. But there used to be a whole bunch, like there were like 12 other ones that they could open up, and if they really cared about civilians, right? They could have them, put them in, refugee camps, or in, displaced persons camps, that would be done through the UN anyway, right? In, like, say, the Negev, or just outside of Gaza. But they would never do that, because then that would mean that there would be Palestinians now living in, land that's supposed to be not for them. So there's that too. Because they always want to put the onus on Egypt, but Egypt only has one border crossing. Israel has like 14 that it could open up, and being such an advanced and humanitarian nation, you know, this makes Gaza unique among war zones this century. The mass killing, bombing, shelling, and other violence have continued, and Palestinians in the Gaza have no way to escape it, either inside Gaza or by crossing an international border. The Israeli military has prevented them from escaping from the violence into Israel, where most of their families fled, or Egypt. They can only remain, facing death and increasingly deteriorating conditions of life. This is the situation infers a clear intent on the part of Israeli authorities to trap Palestinians in Gaza. And again, I just want to stress, most of the people that already lived in Gaza, prior to the Nakba, right, like prior to the inception of the Nakba in 47, um, a lot of them fled into what is now the state of Israel, and, etc. But they won't even let them be there even temporarily. Like even that is too far, right? Like, oh, but what about, Israel, whatever, blah blah blah, right? Um, but yeah, essentially the onus should not be on Egypt, let alone the fact that, there was that report that was released by, I think it was 927 magazine, that, or maybe it was Ynet, but that essentially showed that, they wanted to funnel, right, the Palestinians down to Rafah, and then try to like get Egypt to open up the border, and then just have them move into the Sinai. Um, right, so it's like, but this is trying to say that like most of its international border, right, its largest international border, Gaza, is with Israel. If Israel cares about humanitarian stuff, like it could actually provide it, but it would never do so, right? And so therefore that adds to the intent to destroy in whole or in part, by trapping them in there, creating such conditions that would prohibit them from escaping them and ultimately lead to their destruction.
202. The Commission finds that in relation to the total siege, the following factors indicates that the Israeli authorities' intention to impose conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction of the Palestinian group in Gaza. 1. The nature of the siege imposed, its duration, and the vulnerability of Palestinians in Gaza who are dependent on the humanitarian aid blocked by Israel. 2. the awareness of the objective probability that their conduct would lead to the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza as a group. 3. The continuation of blockade despite warnings, including the flagrant disregard of binding orders of the International Court of Justice. And 4. The entrapment of Palestinians in Gaza, ensuring they cannot escape the violence and eventual destruction of the group. Based on the above, the Commission concludes that the conduct of the Israeli authorities indicates the intention to destroy the Palestinian group in Gaza through starvation and the blocking of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And so there's five. There's as we discussed earlier, there's 5 things, and they have hit 3 out of the 5.
Yeah. Of which even hitting one
Yeah,
counts as
yeah. That's why I was bringing that up, because it's like the first one was already hit. It's case closed. Shut the report. We don't need anything. You don't need any more than that to know, like, okay, well, there's like even if you want to be generous, like, okay, well, this needs to be investigated further. Then, like you don't even need to say like a necessarily a genocide's been committed. There's sufficient evidence for further
Mhm.
investigation into this, just from first one alone.
Right. And so as detailed above, Israel has implemented a concerted policy to destroy the healthcare system of Gaza. Israeli security forces have attacked healthcare facilities and units in Gaza and deliberately killed, wounded, arrested, detained, and tortured military personnel since October 2023. In fact, some of the people at State Teman were medical workers, which they are protected um, class of people when it comes to like war zones and these things, right? Like you cannot attack a hospital. You cannot just there was even footage I remember earlier on in the genocide where like they were almost like praising in the media like Israelis that they had like dressed up like Palestinians or whatever, or even which brings up other questions that I could bring up for war crimes, but essentially that they went into a hospital, right? Like pretending to be like people that needed care so that then they could shoot and, murder specific people that were, again, would be hors de combat, right? That would not be considered legitimate targets. Because people like to use that concept of legitimate target as though it's like it's a matter of like, oh, that the military itself could determine. It's like, no, that's something international law, right? The law of armed conflict, etc. Like it already designates what is and what isn't. And in fact, I forget where this was, but there was this one, oh, I think it was in Afghanistan actually. But just to give a comparison, right? Like also like the media are also people that are not supposed to be, right? Um, but there was one person I remember that like he felt more unsafe, right, wearing his press jacket, right, which shows that he's supposed to be a protected person, but because of that, it also draws attention to him, right, and so might make him a target. And so you see this a lot where you will have people wearing armbands, and there are 3 official symbols recognized by the International Committee of the Red Cross. And also of the Red Crescent, etc. And that is the Red Cross, right, which you can wear as an armband, right? So it's white on red, red on white. Or you can have the Red Crescent, or you can have the Red Diamond, which is the newest one. And like that is enough to be like, don't attack this person. Like they are a humanitarian aid worker. They are rather they are like medical assistants, etc. Blah blah blah. And so they are protected under international law. That is like explicitly gone through, because there used to be other symbols as well, but the 3 that exist now are those 3 that you can use again to distinguish you, but by distinguishing you that also can make you a target in these cases, right? And that's precisely what has happened. So it's not just the mistreatment and arresting, but like the fact that they've killed deliberately. That wording is important. Eventually, the healthcare system in Gaza collapsed, and I remember people would like I forget who this was. I don't remember if it was whatever, but they would. But I think actually, you know what? I do know it was Mr. Borelli. Um, he said like they keep saying that they're gonna have a famine, right? Like, oh, they're on the verge of famine, and his whole thing was like, well, why don't they just have the famine then? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, until you've crossed that threshold in his mind, right? Like, only then people should care, so to speak, or at least that's how that comes across, which doesn't make any sense. But here it says specifically it did collapse. The healthcare system was not on the verge of collapsing. It eventually did collapse. As of 24th June 2025, only 36% of health facilities remain functional, all partially except one field hospital that is fully functional. So I want to note, if just over a third of all of the medical, again, this is all medical facilities, right? So this would include small clinics, this would include, clinics that are part of pharmacies, this would include hospitals, this would include smaller hospitals, right? Like for specific like treatment centers. There's only 36% of that left, right? And the big hospitals, which is also where they have the morgues to count the dead, um, and officially, add to the death toll, are the ones which have been destroyed. Um, so the fact that they only have one field hospital, which as of now, I don't even know if it's functional now, which I believe was either a Turkish one or a Jordanian one. But yeah, like the fact that that's it, or a Qatari one, I can't remember. But a field hospital cannot provide you the type of care you need if you need, like, actual palliative or other forms of care. So just something to note. As of 7th May 2027, 180 ambulances have been attacked, which again, they are protected. There is like, it's kind of like the U.S. shooting at fishing boats or whatever type of boats in the Caribbean. Israel would have to prove that the people there are whatever they say. Otherwise, they have to just let it through, because the chances that it's an actual emergency are too high that you can't just destroy it. But they take the opposite view. The attacks against the healthcare system in Gaza persisted after the ceasefire, and hospitals continue to be attacked by the Israeli security forces.
Something I wanted to say after you were bringing up the Mr. Borelli point, um, before we move on. Um, it's very interesting that people who would often bring up, I think, the UN to kind of justify everything they were saying, oh, this isn't the case. I mean, at the UN, yeah, at the UN, who would bring up the standards, um, in this, and obviously, I assume in other stuff, it's made very clear, like we talked about at the beginning, that um, it does not have to be, it's like the whole of the evidence, and every single one of these people who has defended Israel, uh, sure people have noticed, will only really focus on very specific things and will ignore literally everything else, or they will treat them as separate, distinct things. They're just like completely in isolation of each other, not as a totality, just as just completely separate.
Yeah, like you cannot debate bro genocide. Like you cannot do that. That's not how this works. Like that's the
Yeah,
reason why the system is the way it is. To take in the totality of the evidence. Because people will say, oh, well, this one little tiny minor point, whatever. But also in doing that, they also become complicit in genocide, because then they
yeah,
become part of genocide denial, right? And that's one thing that I wish people would also, take away from this, is that, like, the people that are still arguing these, supposedly fine points, right, splitting hairs and everything, it's like, at this point, it should be obvious that they are participants, right? They are, that is to say, they are complicit in genocide itself, um, and should be understood in that way. Um, so, you know, at least that would be my contention. And that's definitely the view of a lot of other people as well, because denial is a part of genocide as well. And so fighting, trying to obfuscate, trying to debate bro this, it's like, no, like, one, it's not a matter of personal opinion either. Like
Yeah.
the people that say, like, well, I don't think it's one. It's like, well, it doesn't matter whether you think it's one, Asmongold, right? You know, like it doesn't matter. That's not how people determine it. But anyway,
Before I continue, not
um,
so Oedipus says, again, conspiracy theorists, but backwards. Instead of stringing together things of little to no relation, there is taking apart things which are together. That's the only way they can argue. Yeah,
yeah,
it is. It is literally. This kind of goes back to something I know about, and I'm going to take a little side chain because this. Latour talks about this. Um, if you just take like a single like instance of like a scientific paper and you just a graph or something, it becomes literally meaningless. It doesn't have any meaning. It only has meaning when all these pieces are put together and they're doing it. And that's literally what they're doing. They're destroying the meaning of any of these things. They stop having um they become these as he calls them freeze frames on these little sometimes like really minor things, and it's not that they're focusing on a minor point to talk about a larger connected point. They are talking about something minor at the exclusion of literally everything else. There is only this small little piece of something, um and that is supposed to be indicative that there's like no genocide, and that's what they use as
yeah,
evidence.
yeah. And then the same thing too is like they will even um, like when an organization I'm part of, right, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, when we had our vote, which where we said like we officially recognize all of us as an organization that this is a genocide and blah, blah, we laid out our things. People act like we just thought of it one day and just like, oh, raise your hands. It's like, no, this was something that was researched, and that's why it didn't come out right away. It took a long time because one, there are people that are have their areas of expertise in different things, right, in different areas, different aspects, and so it took a long time to get all these documents drafted in order to then present it to the membership to then put it to a vote, of which again there had to be a quorum and a two-thirds majority in order to get it passed. So it wasn't like, oh, some fringe group. It's like there had to be a certain amount of people that voted in the first place, let alone how high the vote would have to be. So when it does come to this determination again, as some of us definitely came to the conclusion earlier than others, but that's what the compilation and the overarching work that people did of the executive committee and the steering committee did in order to make it so that we could vote on it. Because again, the Journal of Genocide Research is publishing stuff that's happening right now. The Journal of Palestine Studies, writing stuff right now. Like all of this stuff, right? A lot of this stuff is new, right? But scholars are still working through it, and so that's why it took a while. But the point being that it's because we wanted to, you know, approve something that actually went in depth and actually addressed things. It's sort of how this document is, right? Like that's kind of what we voted on. We essentially looked through this, right? But without, so without that being said, like without it saying we believe, we believe, we believe, right? It was these are the facts, right, of the case, so to speak. And this is what we deem to be the merits of the case, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
Do we think, right? Because I know a lot of people tried to like, oh, well, that doesn't matter, that doesn't care. Some random ex-member or whatever said like, oh, actually, it was whatever. It was something that took a long time, and again, is not a determination to be taken lightly. Um,
yeah.
so
Before I continue, finally, not so Oedipus said, ask these people to name a house, and they will argue with you on whether the toaster is a toaster. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Or that what Israel did in Lebanon was like an act of terror or not, when it's like it so obviously is. It's by definition
yeah,
indiscriminate. oh well, some people, care about things like that. Other people care about going on H3 and using their time with Ethan Klein to bring doubt into the Sabra and Shatila massacre.
Yep.
But anyway.
205. Israel's concerted policy to systematically destroy healthcare facilities and its attack against healthcare professionals have forced Palestinians to live without access to crucial medical care, therefore killing many Palestinians and causing further irreparable harm, both physical and mental, to many others. Israeli authorities continued their chokehold on the Palestinians in Gaza by blocking the medical equipment, supplies, and medicine from entering Gaza, and at the same time prevented Palestinians in need of medical assistance from leaving Gaza. Many doctors and healthcare professionals have told the Commission that patients have died due to the collapse of the healthcare system in Gaza. For example, cancer patients have died due to the lack of adequate treatment, and at times it was impossible to perform surgery since the 7th of October 2023 due to the lack of proper facilities, like Shakespeare said earlier.
Let's see here. You read 205, right?
Yeah, I read 205. We're on
Okay.
206.
I'll read 206 and 207. The hardship
Yeah.
faced by Palestinians was further compounded by the Israeli authorities' refusal to grant Palestinians in Gaza permits to leave for medical treatment in hospitals in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem or elsewhere. I want to note this. They have a right under international law. People in Gaza have a right as Palestinians to travel to Palestine, right? Through Palestine. That is a right of all of us, right? Like I have the right to travel through all of Mexico. You have the right to travel through all the United States, right? There can be no hindrance of these things, right? Without any, I don't want to go too deep into like, oh, well, unless there's legal justification of which, by which I mean blah blah blah. But but like they have the right to seek treatment wherever there is treatment. There is no treatment in Gaza. They're willing to go to East Jerusalem or the occupied West Bank and go to hospitals there where they're still functioning, but they are denied because that would mean that. And I remember being told by someone who actually did this that they were approved, that you essentially get to leave Erez Crossing and you essentially just can't stop until you reach, and in their case, the Jordanian border. Um, so um, so that's another thing, and the fact that they won't let them go to other countries is another thing too, because there used to be a thing where there used to be a way for people to go to Jordan or Turkey or Lebanon or whatever it might be, Egypt, um, or other countries to receive medical treatment that was unavailable in Gaza, but now they just don't. So yes, like that's why I brought up like hemodialysis earlier. Like that's impossible. So all these people that needed it to live, that otherwise would have died, have died of kidney failure, have died of other complications because of diabetes. Um, the mortality rate of women because has spiked because there's not, like they can't get epidurals. They can't, if they do a C-section, they have to do without any localized anesthesia or anesthesia in general or blah blah blah, right? Like all these things compound. um Same thing with like vaccines, right? Like people can't get life-saving vaccines or can't get anything, so there's very little possibility for life through that, right? um but just to note, like, as their right is to move within Palestine as Palestinians, but Israel denies them that right, which is again, illegal. As a result, many Palestinians, including those who already required medical care prior to the current conflict, such as cancer patients, could not obtain assistance. The commission highlights the reproductive violence inflicted upon, and this was actually in another report where they actually did, because they had done one report on, the supposed, and I'm only saying like, are the alleged, right, sexual violence, which whether it occurred or not, right, there's so much, but of Palestinians on October 7th. Then they did a report on Israeli, um, and for which they had like absolute concrete evidence for all of it, including like the bombing of specific treatment centers, the destruction of sperm banks, etc., things like that, right? Where people who wanted to do IVF or other things, right, had their, like if they had frozen their eggs, they had been destroyed, blah blah blah, all that stuff. So, um, specifically, the commission notes the destruction of the Al Basma IVF clinic, the largest fertility center in Gaza. This facility was intentionally targeted and destroyed by the Israeli security forces, knowing that the result of such conduct would prevent, in part, of reproduction of Palestinians in Gaza. The commission has found that the destruction of the clinic was an act of reproductive violence that was not only conducted physically and to physically and mentally harm Palestinians, but also was calculated to prevent births of Palestinians in Gaza and to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as a group. The commission finds that the attack was intended to destroy the future of Palestinians, the growth of the group, and their very existence, which is one of the things that is listed as, um, you know, um, very openly um, something that is illegal. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
or pardon me, something that constitutes genocide under the the convention already.
Yeah.
So
208. The Commission finds that the Israeli authorities were aware that, by destroying the healthcare system through Gaza, their action would lead to the destruction of Palestinians as a group. Not only did the Israeli security forces destroy the healthcare system, but Israeli security forces continued to kill and harm Palestinians while intentionally obstructing them from trying to access much needed medical assistance and facilities. Therefore, the Commission concludes that the systematic and complete destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza, the siege-induced deprivation of medical necessities to Palestinians, the denial of medical exit via visas to Palestinians who were in medical need were part of the intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza, preventing their capacity and possibility to heal, recover, and live.
mhm, yeah. Sexual and gender-based violence. So this is the one that they had done a report on for perpetrated against the Palestinians. The commission finds that Israeli security forces have perpetrated sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians in Gaza since 7th October 2023, including rape, sexualized torture, and other forms of sexual violence. At first, I wasn't sure if I should do the common, way of saying it that a lot of other people do, but anyway. As detailed above, such conduct has been widespread and systematic and has resulted in gender-specific harms. For example, Palestinian men and boys were subjected to sexual assaults, including rape, while women were often severely humiliated, leaving a particular and severe negative psychological impact on them. And indeed, like, um, that is, it's those cases of sexual assault that happened in like Sde Teman, where people were praising them, and people were like trying to break in, trying to make sure that they never get prosecuted, and having like a parade for them, essentially, for them to keep doing that. I'll keep reading since the next few are that we can
Also,
read. Yeah,
also, don't worry about like saying rape or anything. Like it's not like I'm monetized or anything, so it doesn't even really matter. But like I don't know, it's just this is a serious thing to me,
yeah,
and even if I was monetized, I kind of don't care. It's something
okay.
that it, the it's a heavy subject, and and this stuff needs to be said, even though it's
Yeah,
obviously
no,
like really, really hard.
yeah. I agree. So the Commission has heard from many Palestinian victims who were subjected to sexual and gender-based violence while in detention. For example, Israeli security forces beat male detainees and attacked the detainees' genitals, often while the detainees were naked. In fact, there was in the video, in the documentary documenting war crimes in Gaza by Al Jazeera, like it even shows that they like it was female IDF soldiers that were doing it as well and humiliating them, right? So it's like an added level of like mental, right? Like it wasn't just men doing it to men. They also made it so that way female IDF soldiers, right? Girl boss IDF soldiers, right? Also committed those acts and were humiliating them too. Um, One detainee, for example, stated that he had been beaten and his genitals had been kicked so severely that he had vomited and lost consciousness. Similarly, Israeli security forces use sexual assault and harassment against female detainees during detention. For example, some female detainees were photographed without their consent and in degrading circumstances, including in their underwear in front of male soldiers. And these photographs were often posted by Israeli security forces on public social media, which again is culturally speaking, like that is a huge, I mean, let alone already like the gendered aspect of everything, but also from the cultural sense. Like think about just how fucked up this is, because we already had all those pictures of the very proud Israelis, right? Like going into people's homes and like stealing women's lingerie and putting it on, right? It's like this weird, so it's like they are inflicting this to harm forever, right? It's irreparable harm. Um, Israeli security forces committed acts of sexual violence not only to profoundly degrade the direct victims, but also to publicly humiliate the Palestinians as a group. This is evident through the soldiers' social media content where they blatantly showed themselves committing acts to dehumanize Palestinians. One of which is, of course, them stealing women's lingerie and wearing it. And one soldier I remember from the documentary, like his Tinder profile is him in his like with his gun and everything, and he's like against the wall and he's like kind of looking up in this like gazy sort of way, like stargazy kind of way, and then surrounding him are like it's all of this stolen like lingerie from Gaza, and it's just such a weird, to me it's just such a weird thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes Karasu says first based envy, but also some of the shooting the doctors reported are in fact aimed for the genitals at times too. Yeah, no, that's true. Which is again intended to like the fact that you said that it deserves to be said. Like, yes, I agree, because one of the things is like because people didn't want to say like, when they're harming people that have what are typically considered male genitalia, right? They won't say it. They won't say it like that. Although as if that weren't an attempt to try to harm their ability to reproduce,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Also, yeah, no, okay, so I kind of have a thing about it. I kind of, if people want to silence themselves with serious topics like this, I kind of, there's a little bit of me that loses respect for most of those people, because you shouldn't beat around the bush. You need to say it
no,
how it is, because these are people that we're talking about, people who have experiences, like not even people sometimes, in cases like this sometimes there's individual examples talked about, but behind these individual examples are sometimes fucking multitudes, and so it's important to say all of
yeah,
it in the graphic and horrible detail that's here, because otherwise it risks being treated as like, unserious. It's like
right.
people
And
on
I think, and
TikTok who say grape, and it's like
right,
it's
no, and I also think that by doing that, it also seems to like take away the blame in some sense. Like it kind of like helps to whitewash, right? Is like
yeah,
these crimes by the IDF, right? By not speaking openly about them. It's like, no, they're doing this. And
yeah,
they will post it online. Like they will post it on their social media. They will send it to each other on WhatsApp. They think that this is something to be proud of, right? So, and these targets are children below 18. Yes, like there's one specifically where they had um it was mixed with, fully grown men but also children. And sometimes people will themselves, like for example historically in the during the Nakba itself, like during the supposed war, right, that was happening, you had Israel saying that in some cases it would count children as young as 10, yeah, right, that were considered boys, right, that they would count someone as young as 10 as being an enemy combatant, as a potential enemy combatant, when like internationally it's typically is at 16 if not higher. But like again, that's not something that the state of Israel can lower on its own, but it has, and it has said it has. Um, right? To be like, oh well, 12-year-olds, they could also be blah blah blah. And it's like that's a child,
Yeah.
like that is a literal child. And so, but there are examples where they will, where they had this, I think it was like in a stadium, and they had them like burying themselves, and it like it's not only just humiliating, because like I also think of it from the cultural side, right? Like for example, like Orthodox Jewish culture is one very very much like not does not see like being nude in a positive light. Like it actually sees it as something degrading, right? Or something that can be degrading, right? I'm not saying like in general, but like so the fact that you have people that would be like nude in front of older people, right? It's like, let alone the soldiers, let alone everything else, let alone if they like it's also cultural stuff that you also have to consider, as well as the psychological and the physical, right? Because that is also something that leaves scars for ages to come and for generations to come. Because again, like then this becomes their experience vis-a-vis, even something as simple as being naked, right? Which to some people they've never had to think about it. But when you've been in such a horrifying experience as a child, right? Like then that affects how you will live in the future through trauma, etc. So, but yes, agreed. And potential persons, right, who are capable to reproduce, right? That's the reason why they will drop the age down to very young, essentially. Even though, again, like as it said earlier in this, we read in this report, like Isaac Herzog said, like there are no civilians, right? In essence, that's what he's saying. Like even the babies should count as combatants, which literally makes no sense, but it's because they could, as it were, create future generations of Palestinians that would be against the state of Israel. So yeah, like that's why they target um let alone all of the abuse. Like I don't even want to go into like specifics of like what happened in Sde Teman, but like with metal and other things, just like horrifying stuff that they did to people. But this is to, if not kill them, traumatize them, right? Because there is an understanding as well that people that suffer extreme trauma in relation to this, right, then also are less likely to have, like large families, or to, you know, build that trust. Like even something as simple as like building the trust with the partner to even want something like that, to even think in those terms, is something that is like being literally torn away from these people, because they're being humiliated and they're being denigrated. And and then worse is that then they'll post these pictures of even the kids, right, doing these humiliating things, like even young girls, young boys doing these things, and they will post it on in Israel, right? That's what's also horrifying, is like they want to show the humiliation um, and glorify it, right? And so that's um, uh,
212.
212.
Sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians caused not only physical harm, but also severe mental harm through extreme degradation and humiliation of the victims, which occurred from the moment of arrest and throughout detention, including during interrogations and searches. Importantly, the nature and scale of these acts do not support and cannot justify Israel's claims that its military operations were conducted in self-defense, to defeat Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, or to secure the release of Israeli hostages. The sexual nature of the attacks caused severe and extreme physical and psychological harm to the victims, which will affect generations of Palestinians. The Commission finds that sexual and gender based violence is instrumentalized not only as a punishment against the individuals, but as a pattern as part of a pattern of collective punishment to fracture, humiliate, and subjugate the Palestinian populations in its entirety. The Commission therefore finds that the widespread use of sexual and gender based violence against Palestinians in Gaza indicates the intent to destroy Palestinians as a group. Um, Karisu says, I will quote one day a great Hungarian ethnologist about the nakedness. He was talking about the Kara era forced bathing of Roma people in Hungary, but I will need to translate how this cultural dehumanization matters. Yeah, I would love.
Right.
I would very be happy. I very much be happy to
Yeah, like in my own research, in my own even streams, like I've talked about how like one of the things that the United States would do to Mexicans that were, and they used this idea of that Mexicans were typhus ridden, which was not true. Like there was never a typhus outbreak in the American Southwest at the time. I'm talking about 1917, more or less. But also the lead up to it and after it. Really, they did this until very recently in history. Like people within living memory, very much within living memory, that are just parents, not even grandparents, right? That had to go through some of this stuff, but in a different way. I would note. Is that they would have to have their all of the, like when they would try to cross the border to the United States, they would have to have all of their body shaven, right, and then take a bath in kerosene and vinegar, right? So they're in pain, right? Because this is not like modern, you know, stuff, right? Like, and they don't care if they nick you or if they, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? Like, um, and that was done to degrade and humiliate the people that were crossing the border, uh, you know, by making them do that, by making people strip and go into to those showers and then gas their clothes with Zyklon B, for example. So yeah. Oh yeah, cultural dehumanization is a huge, like this is the reason why like the people that want to sort of distance the current actions of the United States government vis-a-vis particularly Mexicans, but also people from Latin America in general, as somehow being like divorced from any. It's like that's something that the whitewashing and revisionist histories of the United States, its own national history, has completely gotten rid of the fact of like the decade of betrayal or all of that stuff that was meant to be humiliating, that was meant to be deleterious to um, you know people's culture, but also people's being within that culture. Um, so we're in 213, right?
214.
214.
We're on
Okay.
to F, direct targeting of children.
Okay. The commission reiterates that from 7th October 2023, yeah, Karasu says, public health arguments often are tools to otherwise and dehumanize entire groups. Yeah, no, it's the reason why actually. So the ideas of Mexicans being, dirty and typhus ridden by the United States is actually why the Nazis in Auschwitz, one of the 40 plus camps that were in there, one of them was called Mexico. And that's actually where they, in fact, I think this will interest you because that's actually where they sent Hungarian Jews. Right, they literally sent the Hungarian Jews to the Mexico camp, concentration lager, right, within Auschwitz-Birkenau, the complex, which is 40 plus different camps, because it had the worst conditions possible. And they learned from the Americans that like, oh well, this equates to how Mexicans are, right? Like this is how their racism also crossed the Atlantic as well. And so, yeah, it was. Again, I can talk more in depth on this later. I don't want to, but it's like the crossover between all of these things is very potent and very, uh, you know, sadly, a lot of it is not researched in depth as much as I would like, especially the connection to like the U.S. Mexico border. But I mean, but I guess that's the research I'm doing, right? So the Commission reiterates that from 7th October to 31st July 2025, out of 60,199 Palestinians who were killed, and that is again, that is the lowest possible number it can be because the standard for determining fatalities is higher than it has ever been in any other war zone ever. 18,400 of whom were children, and tens of thousands of other children have been injured physically and psychologically. Furthermore, Save the Children reported that more children have been killed in the first week after Israel resumed its military operation in Gaza on 18th March 2025 compared to any other week since 7th October 2023. On June 24th, 2024, UNRWA Commissioner General reported that each day on average since 7th October 2023, 10 children have lost one or both legs, and that their amputations have been mostly conducted without anesthesia, as something which I did mention before, due to the prevention of medical supplies entering into Gaza. So again, that also would be something that is again designated to, you know, bring mental and physical harm, because like this is something noted even during the when they had the Great March of Return, that they would aim for people's knees, of kids, right? Like and of other people, right? Like they would aim for the knees, the snipers, because they wanted to incapacitate them. And I mean that in both senses. Like if they don't kill, then they can at least maim, right? They can at least disable, right? And so this number of the 10 children, it's unbelievable. I'll read 215. Importantly, the Commission has found that children have been directly targeted in various ways by the Israeli security forces since 7th October 2023, including during evacuations at shelters and more recently at GHF distribution sites. Medical professionals told the Commission that they have treated children with direct gunshot and sniper wounds, often to the head and abdomen, indicating that the Israeli security forces have intentionally targeted children during their military operations in Gaza. In relation to the attacks along the evacuation routes, and within designated safe areas, the Commission found that the Israeli security forces had clear knowledge of the presence of Palestinian civilians, including children. Nevertheless, Israeli security forces shot at and killed civilians, including children who were holding makeshift white flags. Some children, including toddlers, were shot in the head by snipers. So again, even holding a white flag, even surrendering, even being on your knees and begging for your life, it doesn't matter. They still shoot. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Alrighty, I'll read 216 and also 217 since that's a short one. Medical professionals treated many children with direct gunshot wounds to their head and upper body, indicating that children were shot by snipers or drones or quadcopters. Medical professionals were informed by parents that the children were alone when they were shot, or that the adults who were with the children were completely unharmed. The commission refers to a poll conducted among 65 volunteer healthcare workers who shared their experiences in Gaza since October 2023, the result of which were published in the New York Times. According to the poll, out of 53 health workers who were frequently treated children in emergency contexts in Gaza, 44 doctors, nurses, and paramedics saw multiple cases of preteen children who had been shot in the head or chest. For example, one surgeon stated that in the course of 4 hours he saw 6 children between the ages of 5 and 12, all with single gunshot wounds to the skull. An anesthesiologist stated that he saw many children and the gunshot wound was often to the head. Many had non-curable permanent brain damage. It was almost a daily occurrence to have children arrive at the hospital with gunshot wounds to the head. End quote. The commission also highlights that according to the poll, out of 62 healthcare workers who regularly work with the children during their time in Gaza, 52 doctors, nurses, and paramedics observed nearly universal psychiatric distress in young children, and saw some who were suicidal or said they wished they had died. An orthopedic and hand surgeon stated many said that they wished the next bomb would just hit them to put an end to their torture. In
One thing
relation
I
to
want to add. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. Just one
there
quick
you go.
thing. Is that one of the things that was said by some of these children is that they were afraid of being murdered, but what they wanted to, okay, that's weird to put this in this kind of language, but they were afraid of being torn apart, right? Like they wanted instead to die whole, right? Like, oh, like that's why they say the bomb, right? Because then it's like then their whole body goes away, right? Because they were afraid of like parts of their body being like cut, like they didn't want to suffer dismemberment, right? And it's like for children, again, who are not teenagers, so preteen children that are saying, I don't want to be torn apart. I would rather die in one piece, right? Children saying that is just, my God, I can't even. It's just unbelievable. But I mean, that's precisely one of the things that they would say is like, not only to end their torture of their suffering, but also because they didn't want to be dismembered or to be, whatever, torn apart in some other kind of way, right? That they feared that more than just death, full stop, right? Um, and Karasu says this is what loner box, or as I prefer, denial box, attacked. And these doctors, many of them were white Westerners, right? Many of them were Jewish as well, right? Like, because since he likes to always appeal to people's Jewishness as why why Israel should be able to do such a thing. These are people, some of whom even were like two-state people, right? Like, et cetera, right? But point being that, yeah, um, that's just one thing that I wanted to add, just to sort of add to I mean, it's already horrifying, but it's horrifying to hear children that are like, that you could see as being like your niece or your nephew, right? Like very young,
Yeah.
right? Like 8, 10 years old. And they're over here already thinking of like how they wish that they could die because they already expect to die,
Yep.
right? So, anyway, moving on.
In relation to the direct targeting of children at GHF sites as noted above, several doctors told the commissioners that they have treated many Palestinian children who were shot at GHF sites, including a 1.5-year-old girl who was shot while she was in her mother's arms.
There is a clear pattern of conduct since 7th October 2023 showing that the Israeli security forces directly targeted children in different circumstances with the intention to kill them. In all the cases investigated by the Commission, none of the children posed any threat to the Israeli security forces. So all of Loner Box's stupid arguments, denial box's stupid argument, gone, just gone. I never want to hear any of his stupid stuff ever again. The targeting of children is relevant to infer the genocidal intent of the Israeli authorities because 1. The extensive and deliberate targeting of Palestinian children shows that the military operations were not conducted solely to defeat Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups. Precisely. Like, even if they want to drop the age, like, a toddler can't join Hamas. You know what I mean? Like, like babies are Hamas, like that doesn't make any sense. Nor can they legitimately contribute to the other stated goals of defending the state of Israel and securing the release of Israeli hostages. In fact, if anything, quite the opposite. And again, babies are no threat to the state of Israel. But the state of Israel is a threat to all babies everywhere, actually. And 2, the direct and intentional targeting of Palestinian children was intended to physically destroy the group by eliminating not only today's children, but the possibility of them having children in the future. And that's what I was saying before, right? Like with the torture, is like people that suffer torture in relationship to that, right? Let alone if they are physically tortured, right? And, have problems in that way, are less likely to have children. And if they do, are less likely to have, like, um, uh, you know, uh, an amount that is sort of a median for their culture, right, etc., right? Like if at all, right? Like it makes it hard for them to trust partners. It makes them hard to, like, the effects are, I mean, it's not even just like developmental psychology that people would have to consider, but just like so many other things, just like the trauma that these children would face as they grow up would mean that like the chances of them wanting to bring children into the world, so to speak, right, is very low. I mean, it's quite sad. 2019, pardon me, not 2019, 2019. The Commission further finds that the widespread and systematic targeting of children, also read the conclusion paragraph, of children as part of a strategy to destroy the biological continuity and future existence of the Palestinian group in Gaza, thus the part of the intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. Conclusion. On the basis of fully conclusive evidence, the Commission finds that statements made by Israeli authorities are direct evidence of genocidal intent. Additionally, on the basis of circumstantial evidence, the Commission finds that genocidal intent was the only reasonable inference that could be drawn on the pattern of conduct of the Israeli authorities. Thus, the Commission concludes that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have the genocidal intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. So, um, I don't know if people like Lonerbox and people like I think Destiny said I think apparently Destiny has switch sides or something about this, uh, which he doesn't care. He's just saying whatever the fuck. Uh, I really do wonder what people like Lonerbox's response to this and anyone else who's been covering this. People like Avi Bitteren who tried to fucking provide like direct support for this by being like, oh, it's not that bad, um, like pretty early on. Um, I, I like I don't know. I don't know what more there is to say. I just
No, I know.
I hope these people
Yeah,
just
no.
I hope these people just see this and they magically change their minds, but they probably won't. They just won't. They just
I mean,
somebody
this
that
is why I think that you know, um, some people, right, definitely need to be. This is why, like, I think genocide education is so important, but also why, like, people like that have been propagandists, yeah, they aren't. Their response is deception, right? They aren't passive
yeah
supporters, right?
yeah
And so that's where, like, the fact that they are complicit in it, right, is the fact that I think that, you know, in a just world, right, people that have been, open propagandists, right, would suffer, legal consequences for this and would, be, made to provide restorative justice to the people that they have helped, a state commit genocide against. So,
gonna be honest, even if not that, just like have their fucking the very least have their platforms taken away. They aren't allowed to stream on these web on YouTube, on Twitch, on wherever the fuck they're streaming. They aren't allowed anymore because this is uh it is now without a there's nothing they can say. If they deny
yeah,
the genocide, they are engaging in genocide denial, not by my opinion or anyone else's, but by this opinion, who a lot of them seem to act like they respect. And so you not only have people saying people that are like against them who might have already supported Gaza and stuff like that. You have the of this now saying this which they are supposedly some of them respect, and
right.
it is there's just like nothing more. There's just like nothing more.
Yeah.
Uh, thank everyone for being here. We went for 3 hours, a little bit over 3 hours.
Wow.
Um, but I think it was well worth it. I do not regret any second of it. It was a very um, terrifying topic. Um, but necessary. It's necessary. Thank everyone who stayed, even if it was just for a little bit, because this has gone on for so long, and I assume, you know, maybe not all of you could
Yeah.
have stayed, but even with all this, I learning about this stuff is important, and I think it's necessary to do. And I'm glad I could hopefully help some of you get through this stuff because I know sometimes even if you want to do some of this stuff, it's hard to read this stuff alone. It, it's
Yes.
it's 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 difficult. It's harrowing. All you can think about is what's on the page, what's being said, and it gets to you. It
Yeah, it
gets to
does.
you. And so, thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you all, and al Ghurba al Palestine. Um, and Yeah. Thank you again for having me on and for reading with me.
And before I go, I wanted to note I don't know when. We do not have anything determined, but we will also be going over the Human Rights Watch report. I don't
That's
know
right.
when that will be, and I don't know how long it is. I didn't even know there was a Human Rights Watch report, but we'll be going over that, and so as well. So I don't know when that'll be, and I don't know how long it is, and so how many parts it'll be. But um, depending on the length, we might be able to cover that in one stream too, even if it's a long one like this. Uh, but thank you all, and I really do hope you all. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as you can with a topic like this.
Same. Thank you, everyone.
All right, bye, stream.